Good afternoon, I'm Rachel Kelly.
And I'm Gillian.
Every year, the Singapore budget marks an important event on our calendar as it depicts the government's spending plans to transform the economy, prepare for the future and provide support to Singaporeans. I'll be joined in the Straits Times studio with a panel of experts as we digest this year's budget speech and break down what it means to you.
And we want to hear from you as well. I'll be monitoring your comments on this year's budget live on social media and channeling your key questions to our panel of experts. Leave your questions in the comment section below.
Hello, welcome to Budget 2020, jointly organised by the Straits Times and Money FM 89.3, presented by United Overseas Bank in partnership with KPMG and Reach. Minister for Finance, Heng Keat, is expected to present his budget speech for the year in a short while. And these are extraordinary times. With the recent hit of COVID-19, better known as the novel coronavirus, we expect this budget to carry elements to tackle the current outbreak. I'm joined here in the studio by a panel of experts to discuss Budget 2020. Joining me are Alvin Liew, Senior Economist from UOB, Chiu Hong, Tax Partner from KPMG, Dr. Gillian Ko, Deputy Director, Institute of Policy Studies at NUS, as well as Vikram Khanna, Associate Editor from the Straits Times. Welcome all. Thank you. Now, every Singaporean will have an expectation on what needs to be addressed in this year's budget, daily issues benefiting society and more. And before we hear from our panel of experts, our Straits Times team went out to find out from the public just what was on their budget wish list for 2020. Here's a quick look.
So I think what really helps from the government is just grants to help startups like us. I definitely would hope that the government can help, maybe have a little subsidy or something for the rental here. That would really help.
Rental-wise, yeah, I think that's probably the toughest.
Rent control, to be honest. F&B has always had issues with staffing. I guess a sort of budget or allowing us to have a slightly lower quota, especially for small companies, would really help us.
I would want to see a little bit more on the education of reskilling, because reskilling, because as people tend to feel trapped in a loop of their own feedback loop where they see they can't reskill or they're trapped in a job they don't like.
It's hard to have to juggle childcare and working longer hours, being accepting of parents needing to having different arrangements at work, sometimes working, having permission to work remotely or working from home because your child is sick. Those types of things are really helpful.
The baby bonus, when you get, it goes away within the first 1 year, all to milk, pampers, student care. It's not enough to sustain a family.
Wish that government can do more for us with those have 2 or more than 2 children, like childcare leave. You have more than 2 children, the 6 days is not enough lah.
My close friends, they've got 4 kids and they still have the same amount of childcare leave, which doesn't make sense.
I think the medical benefits for the elderly is important because the cost is getting more and more expensive these days. Yeah, I think that is the main concern.
I think particularly in healthcare, my mom's currently 68 and at her age it's too late to buy insurance, for example, if she hasn't bought before.
Cheaper healthcare, that's the most important part. Yeah.
Now, those were certainly some interesting comments, but let's hear more from our panel. And let's start with Alvin. So obviously, COVID-19 has been at the top of most people's minds and conversations. What measures are you expecting from budget this year to buffer the blow?
Okay, to put things into perspective, like maybe less than a month ago, everybody is looking at different things, but within that short span of time, this coronavirus really took the headlines. And the difference right now what we see is that where the epicenter is in China, versus last time we will put it is at Hong Kong. So right now, China is now the second biggest economy, and in the past during the 2003, it's like the 6th largest, and probably didn't have so much impact on them as well. So right now, I think the economic impact is likely to be greater, and therefore, right, the expected measures, right, not just for individuals but more to the economy itself, especially to the sectors more affected, would be very much in focus. Those sectors, of course, right off the top of the list was tourism, I think aviation sector, the related industries, F&B, all those would like to see what kind of key measures that the government can come up with to help them tide through this period, which is quite uncertain when it would really turn around.
And Wu Hong, what are you hoping for from this year's budget?
Yeah, from a business perspective, right, I think the key thing is about what are the measures that the government can introduce to address the immediate short terms, and also not forgetting long-term measure. Cash flow will be a main concern for a lot of businesses, and for larger companies, how to remain competitive. What are the measures or incentives that government can roll out to make themselves more competitive and venture overseas? For example, older workers wanting to work longer, what kind of schemes and subsidies are available for them to entice companies to continue to employ them?
I see. Okay.
Those are some of the things, yeah.
And Gillian, kind of moving on from the economy and businesses, what are you hoping for from this year's budget? I mean, elections around the corner. Are we looking at an election budget, lots of sweeteners?
Well, I think whatever the government can do to signal that it's concerned for citizens, for workers, will be good any day, good for the situation that we're facing with COVID-19, and good for an election. I think anything that does that is helpful. So first, what is the budget going to say about keeping Singaporeans employed? Second, what is it going to say about the longer term challenge of making sure that citizens like us, we will age, that senior workers will also stay employed regardless of what the government calls the re-employment age and retirement age. Third, then what can the government do to keep people skilled, re-skilled? We're looking at SkillsFuture. The first gift was just merely $500, and that was many years ago. So I think that's very important. The final one is, of course, basically the whole cost of living issue will hit all of us. So what can the government do to address those 4 key issues?
And I think during the sound bites that we heard from the Straits Times interview and the package out on the street, they mentioned, you know, when it comes to re-skilling, that was a key issue. Flexible working arrangements. I mean, we're seeing a lot of organizations and now implementing that on the back of COVID-19 as well. And I guess
you see how that all kicks in, because if organizations have been prepped for part-time work, for telecommuting, for working outside of the office, then they're well placed. They will have tapped government measures to do that, and now you can see that those measures were so important. But it changes the way we work. It changes Singaporeans' lives. It allows them to work from home, that flexibility that they're trying to achieve with work-life harmony.
I see. Okay. And Vikram, kind of going over to you, what are your hopes from this year's budget?
Well, I think we should just take a measure of the gravity of the situation right now. And we're possibly looking at a recession in the first half of the year. We don't know how long this coronavirus will go on. Will it be 3 months? Will it be 6 months? Will it be longer? SARS lasted for 8 months. So I think we have to prepare for quite a significant hit to the economy. And I think the government has already telegraphed a lot of the measures that are likely. I mean, the finance minister has said that all help will be given to workers and companies to weather this. I think Josephine Teo, the manpower minister, has said that special help will be given to fair and progressive-minded companies that upskill workers and hire older workers. I think we know that there's a GST increase coming down the road.
Yes.
And there will be the beginning of measures to offset the impact of that. And as Alvin mentioned, there'll obviously be very targeted support for the sectors that are on the front lines of this crisis, like tourism, the cruise aviation, food and beverage, and so on. So I think there'll be a whole package of these kind of things just to deal with the economic impact. And then I don't think the government is going to forget about the longer term measures for restructuring, skills, R&D, help for older workers, retirement, and so on. So I think it'll be a package of things, both on the economy as well as on the social side, both short-term and long-term.
So are we then looking at a bigger and bolder budget, given the current environment?
Absolutely. I think this budget, I suspect, will be a cross between the 2009 budget, which was aimed at countering the global financial crisis, and the SARS budget. There'll be a cross between them. Yeah. It'll be a very high spending budget, I suspect. There'll be a lot of stuff given, a lot of help given. So it'll probably be a deficit budget as well, which is fine.
I want to add on to say that this budget will be built on previous budgets, and it will be the foundation and journey throughout for Singapore, and probably it will be giving more assurance to Singaporeans in these challenging times. This budget had to be more bold and probably more decisive.
It also is probably the last budget in this parliamentary term. So I think there will be some fiscal financial headroom in order to be more generous in that sense. I think along the way you've seen the government sort of share the fruits of success, but this time around there's always an accumulated surplus from that parliamentary term, 15.6 billion I would count it up to be. So I think there is that headroom to do something, not just because of COVID-19, but in any case towards the end of a parliamentary term, you'll see that.
Yeah. Maybe businesses would like to get a hint when will the GST be implemented this time around.
And I think other than current issues, kind of moving forward as well, the government's spoken a lot about transforming the economy, sustainability issues. Are we likely to see sustainability issues play a key role in this year's budget as well?
I think definitely the climate change issues that have been brought up quite strongly last year by various ministers, especially by Prime Minister Lee. So we would expect to see measures there to deal with the climate change. And those are really long-term projects, objectives, and I believe that the amount allocated to them will also be quite substantial.
I think the other long-term issue is aging. So what more can the government do to incentivize people to put aside money for retirement on various fronts in various ways? So that's another long-term issue, but not as long as climate change. Yeah.
And you mentioned aging. Are you expecting substantial spend when it comes to healthcare and other sectors that are related to, I guess, Singapore's silver or aging population?
Well, I think we have the Silver Support Scheme, so maybe there might be some tweaks to make it a little more generous, more helpful to the aging who are actually poor and needy. Then also I think healthcare, we've had the Merdeka Generation Package, so how is that enhanced? Then we have CHAS as well, so is that going to be expanded? It was expanded in the last budget. What more can be done in terms of healthcare? That's always extremely helpful and top of mind for Singaporean voters.
I see, okay. Heng, I wanted to ask you, in KPMG's proposal, you spoke a lot about Singapore becoming a transformation platform for Asia.
Yeah. What we are proposing is that transformation is a journey, it's a process. We are looking at how to transform enterprises, how to transform Singapore to be a sustainability hub, and also how to lead Singapore to transform to be a digital economy. So these are there will be schemes of incentives and things like that, like the government can implement or introduce to make Singapore to be a model, to be a future transformation capital in Asia.
Yeah, but the workers, Singaporeans have to feel that they have a part in that story.
That's right.
And it isn't just to benefit international firms or international workers and PMEDs. Yeah. So I think getting people to a space where they can benefit from that transformation is very important and cannot be disjointed. So I think that's quite critical that we look at education, making education cheaper, more affordable, bringing about social mobility through education and work and jobs. Yeah, we have to believe that jobs pay, right?
That's right.
And
so
pay enough to sustain a livelihood.
What kind of courses? It must be more digital-based courses. Maybe the SkillsFuture top up may be enhanced,
Yeah.
you know, and other courses that we can.
Vikram, what's your sense? I mean, given the current environment, do you think some of the transformation issues may have been overshadowed by what's going on at the moment, or are they more critical now than ever in this year's budget?
No, I think they're going to get a lot of attention. I mean, of course, I think the first order of business is to protect against the crisis that the coronavirus has caused. But I think these transformational issues are critical, and you have to carry on. You can't stop in the middle. I think particularly important is reskilling and training. There is a market failure in training. You know, SMEs, for example, less than 15% of SMEs train their existing staff. So there needs to be something there. You mentioned SkillsFuture top-ups. I think that's probably going to happen. I think there's a proposal that it should happen annually. It should not be a sort of periodic sort of thing. So it's a process that will take many years for people. I think people would have probably used up their $500 SkillsFuture credits already. Okay. So we need to go on with keep doing this.
Okay. And Finance Minister Heng Keat has arrived to deliver his budget speech for the year 2020. Let's listen in.
So today I have 3 files instead of 2. So please be patient. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that Parliament approves the financial policy of the government for the financial year 1st April 2020 to 31st March 2021. This year, we usher in a new decade, one marked by tectonic shifts in our operating environment and major uncertainties. Singapore's economy grew by a modest 0.7% in 2019. This is the weakest growth since the 2008 financial crisis. Just as the global economy was beginning to recover, the coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 outbreak hit us. The outbreak will certainly impact our economy. The tourism and aviation industries are most directly affected. Visitor arrivals to Singapore and air traffic through Changi have declined, and with it, hotel occupancy rates. The virus outbreak has also disrupted supply chains and created ripple effects on other sectors, especially now that our economy is so much more integrated with China's. The Ministry of Trade and Industry, or MTI, has downgraded the GDP forecast from between 0.5 to 2.5% to between minus 0.5% and 1.5%. However, the duration and severity of this outbreak and the impact on the global economy are still unclear. While MTI's baselines for GDP growth to come in at 0.5% for the full year, we must be prepared that the economic impact may be worse than we projected. Our immediate concern is to protect you and your families. We will put in every effort to slow down the spread of the virus. Our frontline agencies have been fighting and containing the outbreak. I will set aside an additional $800 million in this budget to support these efforts. The bulk of this will go to the Ministry of Health. This is on top of the substantial resources already committed each year to public health. Let me, on behalf of the government, express our gratitude to all our frontline officers who have been working tirelessly day and night over weekends in our fight against the outbreak. You have exemplified the resilience and indomitable spirit of our people. But please take care of yourselves. I'm confident that together we will stay strong and get through these trying times. With these uncertainties, I know Singaporeans are understandably very concerned about the impact on our businesses and jobs. I will introduce 2 special packages with a total budget of $5.6 billion. The first is the Stabilization and Support Package. This will stabilize the economy and support our workers and enterprises by helping workers to stay in their jobs and enterprises with cash flow. I will give additional help to sectors more directly affected by the outbreak. Households will be impacted by the slowdown too. In every budget, we always provide support to families. But in view of the current situation, we'll have a special care and support package to provide additional timely help to more households with cost of living. The less well-off will get more help. First, let me elaborate on how we'll help our workers and enterprises to weather the near-term economic uncertainties. Our foremost concern is jobs. We want to help our workers retain their jobs and use any lull period to upgrade their skills and be ready when the upturn comes. As NTUC Secretary General Ng Chee Meng and his union leaders said, every worker matters. I will therefore provide a stabilization and support package amounting to $4 billion. To help our workers stay employed, I'll support enterprises by defraying their wage costs through two schemes. I will introduce a jobs support scheme to help enterprises retain their local workers. For every local worker in employment, I will offset 8% of the wages up to a monthly wage cap of $3,600 for 3 months. This payment will be given to employers by the end of July this year. With over 1.9 million local employees in Singapore, this will cost the government $1.3 billion and benefit all enterprises and their employees. For enterprises that have invested in raising productivity, I urge them to continue to upgrade and to share their gains with their workers. Hence, I will enhance the wage credit scheme to support wage increases for Singaporean workers. Currently, the wage credit scheme co-funds wage increases for Singaporean employees earning a gross monthly wage of up to $4,000. I will raise the monthly wage ceiling from $4,000 to $5,000 for qualifying wage increases given in 2019 and 2020, so that more Singaporean employees will benefit. I will also raise the government co-funding levels for 2019 and 2020 qualifying wage increases by 5 percentage points to 20% and 15% respectively. With these enhancements, another $1.1 billion will go to about 90,000 enterprises to benefit more than 700,000 Singaporean employees. The Stabilization and Support Package will also provide economy-wide support to help enterprises with cash flow. First, I will grant a corporate income tax rebate for year of assessment 2020 at a rate of 25% of tax payable, capped at $15,000 per company. This rebate will benefit all tax-paying companies and cost about $400 million. I will also enhance several tax treatments under the corporate tax system for 1 year. For instance, I will allow enterprises a faster write-down of their investments in plant and machinery and renovation and refurbishment incurred for year of assessment 2021. This will put more cash in the hands of our enterprises. For example, hotels can now take advantage of this lull period to carry out upgrading work and be better prepared for the upturn. To help enterprises access working capital more easily, I will also enhance the enterprise financing scheme's working capital loan component for 1 year. I will raise the maximum loan quantum from $300,000 to $600,000 and increase our risk share on these loans to 80% from the current 50 to 70%. With the large part of the risk taken up by the government, I trust that our financial institutions will do their part to support viable SMEs. We'll also support tenants and lessees of government-managed property, including those under JTC, HDB, SLA, STB, and SDC. They can approach our agencies to discuss options for more flexible rental payments, such as installment plans. Each request will be assessed individually, taking into account the enterprise's circumstances. Sectors directly affected by COVID-19 will get additional support. These 5 sectors are tourism, aviation, retail, food services, and point-to-point transport services. To help employers in these sectors retain and reskill workers, we'll enhance support under the Adapt and Grow initiative for this year, specifically through redeployment programs in the tourism, aviation, retail, and food service sectors. For these sectors, we'll extend the funding period for reskilling from 3 months to a maximum of 6 months. Together with the Jobs Support Scheme, we will support employers in these sectors to retain and train more than 330,000 local workers. These workers can make full use of the downtime for training and upskilling to prepare for the recovery. We also help affected sectors with their operating costs and cash flow. For the tourism sector, I'll grant a property tax rebate of 30% for the year 2020 for the accommodation and function room components of licensed hotels and service apartments and prescribed meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibition venues. International cruise and regional ferry terminals will receive a 15% property tax rebate, and the integrated resorts will receive a 10% property tax rebate. For enterprises in the tourism sector, we'll be working with participating financial institutions to introduce a temporary bridging loan program for a year, with a loan quantum of up to $1 million and interest rate capped at 5%. The government will take on 80% of the risk of the loan. This will provide more cash flow on top of the enhanced working capital loan I announced earlier. For the aviation sector, we'll implement a suite of measures comprising rebates on aircraft landing and parking charges, assistance to ground handling agents, and rental rebates for shops and cargo agents at Changi Airport. I will also grant a 15% property tax rebate for Changi Airport. To support commercial establishments in the food services and retail business, the government will take the lead. NEA will provide a full month of rental waiver to stallholders in NEA-managed hawker centers and markets. Other government agencies, like the HDB, will provide half a month of rental waiver to its commercial tenants. To support establishments that operate in private property, I will also grant a 15% property tax rebate for qualifying commercial properties. I strongly urge landlords to pass this on to their tenants by reducing renters. The Ministry of Transport has announced a point-to-point support package. I'm heartened to know that many taxi and private hire car operators have come out strongly to support the initiative by matching the government's contribution. This spirit of partnership is what we need to weather this challenging period together. Details of the stabilization and support package are in the annex. The ministers in charge of the various measures will share further details in due course. We will continue to monitor the situation closely. If needed, we can and are prepared to do more. I will speak about the care and support package for households later in my speech. The COVID-19 outbreak is a stark reminder of the continued importance of maintaining a sound fiscal footing to deal with surprises and unexpected scenarios. In particular, we are able to mount a decisive response to support Singaporeans and workers through uncertain times only because of good long-term planning. I announced in 2018 that we plan to raise the GST by 2 percentage points to 9% sometime from 2021 to 2025. This is to raise recurrent revenues to meet our recurrent spending, particularly for healthcare. After reviewing our revenue and expenditure projections and considering the current state of the economy, I've decided that the GST increase will not take effect in 2021. In other words, the GST rate will remain at 7% in 2021. However, we'll not be able to put off the increase indefinitely. In fact, this outbreak has reinforced the importance of continued investments in our healthcare system, including the capability to deal with outbreaks. I will still require recurrent sources of revenue to fund our recurrent spending needs in the medium term. Thus, the GST increase will still be needed by 2025. We'll assess carefully the appropriate time for the increase, but rest assured, we'll provide Singaporeans sufficient lead time. I want to assure everyone that when we raise the GST rate, we will ensure that our taxes and transfer system remains progressive. We'll continue to absorb GST on publicly subsidized healthcare and education. And just as we have done in the past, we'll provide an assurance package when the GST rate is raised. This will be a $6 billion package for Singaporeans to cushion the increase as we transition to the higher GST rate. GST is paid by all in Singapore, including foreigners working and visiting here. But the assurance package will benefit Singaporeans. The majority of Singaporean households will receive offsets to cover at least 5 years' worth of additional GST expenses incurred. So the majority of Singaporean households will receive offsets to cover at least 5 years' worth of additional GST expenses incurred. Lower income households will receive much more. Those living in 1 to 3 room HDB flats will receive offsets equivalent to about 10 years' worth of additional GST expenses incurred. Under the assurance package for GST, every adult Singaporean will receive a cash payout of $700 to $1,600 over 5 years. To illustrate, a family of 4 with a combined income of $6,000 living in a 4-room HDB flat can receive about $7,000 in offsets over 5 years in total. This includes cash of about $4,000. Over and above the transitional support, we already have the permanent GST voucher or GSTV scheme. It defrays GST for lower to middle income Singaporeans. When the GST is raised, I will enhance the permanent GST voucher scheme. I will maintain the government's public commitments to fully offset the GST for the lower half of retiree households, significantly offset the GST for the upper half of retiree households, and offset about half of the GST for lower income households with no elderly persons. This is the government's way of ensuring our system of taxes and transfers remains progressive and supports Singaporeans through the change, while enabling us to fund our future needs in a sustainable way. No, it's not mine. It's not mine. To meet these commitments, I will set aside $6 billion for the assurance package in the GSTV fund in this year's budget. Even as we navigate our near-term challenges, we must maintain our focus on the longer term and on Singapore's future. I've spoken about the accelerating structural shifts in the world in my previous budget speeches. First, the decline in support for globalization. Second, the shift in global economic weight towards Asia, which brings new opportunities. Third, the rapid advancement of technology, and more recently, the risk of a technologically bifurcated world. And finally, our own transition to an aging society, which presents challenges and opportunities. We must understand these shifts and their deep implications as we chart our future together as one Singapore. After the Second World War, nations experienced several decades of growth and prosperity. Trade barriers fell, and global trade grew rapidly. Technological advances transformed people's lives beyond recognition. Prosperity gave governments the resources to establish comprehensive safety nets and welfare programs. This included unemployment benefits, pensions, and healthcare, among others. But at the same time, globalization and technology created winners and losers and widened income inequalities between the skilled and unskilled. There are growing sentiments that globalization and the multilateral system have failed. As a result, nations are turning inwards. Protectionism and nativism are on the rise. An aging population, disruption to jobs, and slowing economic growth are adding to fiscal pressures. Yet it is politically untenable to cut back on social benefits. When governments issue debt to fund social spending, they impose a growing debt burden on the next generation. This is happening at a time when the global economy is experiencing weaker growth and dampened sentiment. Central banks have lowered interest rates to unprecedented level. In addition, asset purchases by central banks have resulted in abundant liquidity and raised concerns over the formation of asset bubbles. In fact, with limited fiscal space and ultra-low or even negative interest rates, governments and central banks are much less able to mount stabilization measures. On the strategic front, the friction in the US-China relationship is a major source of tension and uncertainty, affecting global economic growth. The recent Phase 1 trade deal between them has headed off an immediate escalation, but it will not resolve the underlying strategic competition. This involves political systems, ideologies, and values, and goes beyond trade and technology. On present trends, US-China tensions will recreate geopolitical fault lines and portend a bifurcated global order. I've sketched out the global structural shifts, economic uncertainties, and strategic tensions. I trust members will see that we are entering a very challenging time. But we can and we will pull through. To deal with these major shifts, we need a capable government working closely with our people and a good plan. As a city-state, we are small but nimble. We are a trusted node for trade and investments between Asia and the world. This is because of our political stability, commitments to rule of law and multilateralism, ease of doing business, and strong intellectual property protection regime, among others. As a multicultural society, we have welcomed diversity and embraced openness. Our diversity has made us stronger and more valuable to the world. Our biggest asset is our exceptional people. We have come together and weathered many past storms, like the global financial crisis, SARS, and now the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak. Budget 2020 is a strategic financial plan to prepare Singapore and Singaporeans to meet these challenges and seize new opportunities. This budget, I'll lay out our plans in 4 areas. First, to grow our economy, transform our enterprises, to create opportunities for our people. Second, to care for and nurture Singaporeans at every stage of their lives, to build a caring and inclusive society where no one is left behind. Third, to build a livable and sustainable Singapore in the face of climate change, secure our sovereignty as an independent nation, and ensure our fiscal sustainability. And fourth, to mobilize Singaporeans to work together in this journey, to build a nation and a home we'll always call our own. Let me start with growing our economy and transforming our enterprises. The structural changes I described earlier bring both opportunities and challenges. Technology and innovation will drive our productivity and our next phase of growth. Amidst declining support for globalization, most of Asia remains committed to free trade and economic integration. The Asian economies have strong growth drivers and are projected to account for half of global GDP by 2040. Singapore is well positioned to make the most of these structural changes. We recognized these changes early and made an early start on economic transformation. We set up the Future Economy Council, or FEC, in 2017, and we now have 23 industry transformation maps, or ITMs. Our restructuring is bearing fruit. In the last 3 years, overall productivity, as measured by real value added per actual hour worked, rose by 2.6% per year. This is an improvement over the 2.2% growth in the preceding 3-year period. Our enterprises are entering new markets and doing business globally. Singapore Business Federation's 2019 National Business Survey shows that 8 in 10 enterprises have an overseas presence, up from 7 in 10 the previous year, despite global uncertainties. Their spirit of enterprise augurs well for the future. Overall, these efforts at enterprise transformation have translated into good wage growth. Between 2016 and 2019, real median income for Singaporeans grew by 3.7% per year, up from 3.2% per year in the preceding 3 years. Two years ago, I set out our vision of Singapore as a global Asian node of technology, innovation, and enterprise. Our economy will be one driven by innovation and digitalization. Singapore will serve as a launchpad for multinationals and regional corporates to access Asia and for Asian enterprises to go global. Our enterprises will compete on value and reach new customers, and these enterprises will be powered by a skilled, adaptable, and Asia-ready workforce. To support this vision, in this budget, I will introduce a set of measures to drive our transformation and growth strategy. There are 3 key thrusts. First, enabling stronger partnerships. Second, deepening enterprise capabilities. Third, developing our people. Including sums allocated in previous years, I'm allocating a total of $8.3 billion over the next 3 years to enable transformation and growth. Let me begin with the first thrust of our transformation and growth effort, which is to enable stronger partnerships with the world to expand our economic space within Singapore to build on our work through the FEC and ITMs. As a small, open economy, we must continue to strengthen partnerships with the world. We have an extensive network of economic linkages, including free trade agreements, international investment agreements, and avoidance of double taxation agreements. For example, Minister Indrani signed our latest avoidance of double taxation agreement with Indonesia earlier this month. Beyond economic connectivity, we are enhancing our digital connectivity to create new value. Singapore Customs is connecting our networked trade platform with the customs portals of our trading partners. Just last month, we concluded our first digital economy agreement with Chile and New Zealand. It will foster interoperability and address frontier issues like artificial intelligence governance and to enable more trade. The digitalization of finance will also open up new ways of doing business. Between 2015 and 2019, annual investments in fintech, financial technology, have risen sixfold to over $1 billion. Players from different domains and around the region are coming together to bid for MAS's digital banking licenses. To make the most of our global links, we must strengthen partnerships within Singapore to bring good ideas to global markets. Under our Research, Innovation and Enterprise 2020 plan, we are sustaining investments into promising ideas. This includes artificial intelligence, industrial robotics, urban solutions and sustainability, and health and biomedical sciences, among others. Through partnerships among the government, industry, and research community, we are turning these ideas into new businesses with global potential. For instance, Singapore was one of the first cities to allow autonomous vehicles, or AV, testing on public roads. Many AV players have set up here, testing their technologies with National University of Singapore and Nanyang Technological University, seeking to win the global race. In the biomedical industry, the number of startups has doubled from 2014. More than 300 biomedical startups are now bringing discoveries from bench to bedside and looking to export them to the region. In fact, our research institutes are part of the global fight against COVID-19, developing rapid diagnostic kits already in use here and sent to China. This is one of the fruits of our long-term investments in research and innovation. Within each industry, we need to strengthen partnerships to deepen industry-wide capabilities. Even as our enterprises compete to differentiate themselves, they must come together to solve common challenges. Trade associations and chambers, or TACs, play an important role. For example, the Container Depot and Logistics Association is developing an electronic payment system that can help depot operators and transport companies save time and costs. The details are in the annex. To sustain the good progress, we will enhance our support for TACs to scale up and raise the capabilities of their industries. Enterprise Singapore will launch a pilot executive in residence program to fund more than 10 TACs covering all sectors of the economy to hire experienced executives and provide expert advice to enterprises in their industries. Likewise, merchant associations play a critical role in upgrading heartland enterprises, such as what the Chong Pang City Merchant and Hawker Association has done. This year, Enterprise Singapore will launch a new Heartland Enterprise Upgrading Program to support merchant associations to drive transformations of heartland enterprises. I've covered how we are deepening partnerships. The second thrust of our transformation and growth is to deepen capabilities at every stage of a company's growth, of an enterprise growth. From starting up to growing to transforming further. Our enterprises must be the incubators of innovation, the crucibles for skills upgrading, and the creators of good jobs for our people. Many of our enterprises are deepening their capabilities by innovating, digitalizing, and venturing overseas. This includes smaller companies like Yongleng Trading Company, a local provider of sealing solutions for industrial customers, and PDS International, a developer and distributor of personal protective equipment. By adopting digital platforms, they have accessed new markets, raised revenues, and reduced costs. Larger local companies are also transforming. GoBell Group, an industrial vehicle leasing company, launched an in-house accelerator while MoveOn, an optics manufacturer, partner our research institutes to develop enhanced production technologies for micro-optical systems. More details are in the annex. We will enhance our support to enterprises at each stage of their growth to deepen their capabilities in an enterprise-centric way. Let me begin with startups. Our startup ecosystem is vibrant. There are about 3,800 technology startups in Singapore and about 150 venture capital funds investing in startups here and in the region. Our startup ecosystem is ranked in the top 15 globally in a global startup ecosystem report. Startup SG helps startups get their ideas off the ground. It provides holistic support, including co-investments, mentorship, and fiscal space. Through co-investment schemes like Startup SG Equity, we have catalyzed over $560 million in private sector funding over the last 4 years. This year, we'll improve support for deep tech startups. Deep tech startups are those in emerging technology areas such as farm bio and medtech, advanced manufacturing, and agri-food tech. They have high potential to be competitive and stimulate innovation in their sectors. But these startups need larger investments, longer gestation periods, and face higher risks. Investors are hence less prepared to invest in deep tech startups. To catalyze investments into deep tech startups, I will set aside an additional $300 million under the Startup SG Equity. We expect to draw in more than $800 million of private funding over the next 10 years. This will give deep tech startups better access to capital, expertise, and industry networks. We have also been supporting them through schemes such as SME Go Digital. Beyond startups, many enterprises, both new and established, are seeking to grow. We have been supporting them through schemes such as the SME Go Digital program and the Market Readiness Assistance Grant. This year, we will enhance support for these enterprises through an Enterprise Grow package. This package aims to help enterprises identify business needs, adopt pre-approved digital technologies, and take the first steps to enter new markets. First, we'll launch the Go Business platform, a single touch point for enterprises to transact with government digitally. Second, we'll drive greater adoption of digital technology. We'll expand the SME's Go Digital program. Across all 23 ITM sectors, we will have industry digital plans or equivalents and enable enterprises to access pre-approved digital solutions. Third, to help more enterprises enter new markets, we'll enhance the Market Readiness Assistance Grants by expanding the funding support and coverage to include, for example, FTA consultancy. We must continue to support the growth of our enterprises and, as they mature, drive deeper transformation. Today, through the Enterprise Development Grant, or EDG, Enterprise Singapore provides integrated support for enterprises to innovate and internationalize. For enterprises to transform, they need to strengthen their leadership and management capabilities. This year, we will introduce an Enterprise Transform package with a focus on leadership. Enterprise Singapore will launch the Enterprise Leadership for Transformation program to support business leaders of promising small and medium enterprises to achieve the next bound of growth. Over the next 3 years, we aim to support business leaders of 900 enterprises in business transformation with training and mentorship. We will work with institutes of higher learning, or IHLs, banks, and industry experts, and facilitate collaboration. In tandem, we will continue to broaden transformation through the EDG by expanding its reach. In FY 2020, we expect to support about 3,000 projects through the EDG, an increase of more than 10% from the number today. The third thrust of our transformation and growth efforts is to develop our people, so as to enable our people to access good jobs, earn good wages, and stay employable. Economic growth is a means to creating a better life for our people. We must nurture every Singaporean to their fullest potential. The government's promise to Singaporeans is this: regardless of your starting point, as long as you're willing to learn, we will support you to learn throughout life, in pre-employment, in your working years, as we pursue lifelong learning and employability. We'll bring in different partners, including IHLs, enterprises, and the labour movements, to help you do so. Let me begin with the role of our IHLs. Our IHLs provide a strong foundation in learning and have partnerships with industry. IHLs and the industry have distinct roles, and by aligning this to keep learning relevant, students can secure good jobs. Employment rates are high and starting salaries have increased. We develop Singaporean talents in partnership with enterprises under the Singapore Industry Scholarship Scheme. Many of them have graduated and are developing their careers with leading enterprises like ST Engineering and Micron. Our local students are well prepared to thrive in other countries and cultures, including in Asia. About half of all local IHL students today gain experience abroad through programs such as internships, exchanges, and service learnings or study trips. In my pre-budget dialogue with youth leaders, I was struck by their understanding of the importance of learning new skills and exploring new opportunities. They look forward to overseas exposure and postings in the region. To support our local students to acquire cross-cultural skills and understand our region better, we will set ourselves a 70-70 target. 70% of local IHL graduates to have overseas experience, and 70% of this group to have exposure to ASEAN, China, or India. To achieve this target, we'll introduce a new Asia Ready Exposure Program to support local youth visits to cities in ASEAN, China, or India. We'll also enhance support for internships under the Global Ready Talents Program. Beyond pre-employment education, we must also support our people who are already at work. With shorter technology cycles and more intense global competition, skills acquired when we are young need to be constantly refreshed. Career transitions will be more common, even the norm. Our SkillsFuture movement seeks to enable our people to learn, develop new skills, and stay employable. 5 years after the launch of SkillsFuture, we have made good progress. The training participation rate has risen from 35% in 2015 to 49% in 2019. As of end 2019, the SkillsFuture credit has helped more than 500,000 Singaporeans pick up new skills and develop new interests. This includes Mr. Kowitek, a fintech executive who applied his learning in project management to serving his clients, as well as Madam Julia Jahaya, a certified trainer who deepened her people development skills. Singaporeans are also upskilling and accessing good jobs in growth sectors with the support of employers. Younger Singaporeans are undergoing on-the-job training while getting a qualification. Singaporeans who have been working for some time have adapted and grown their skills. One good example is Ms. Noor Hidayah binti Abu Bakar, whom I met at WSG last year. After leaving the electronics industry, Ms. Hidayah joined Atos Holdings as an auxiliary police officer. She went through the tough training as part of the professional conversion program. Today, she not only earns more and has a clearer career pathway, but she is also helping to keep Singapore safe. I'm very encouraged by the efforts made by Singaporeans to acquire new skills in the midst of the major structural changes in the global economy. To further support them in this journey, the government will invest in the next bound of SkillsFuture. There will be three elements to this. First, enabling the individual. Second, enhancing the role of our enterprises. And third, a special focus on mid-career workers. First, to support Singaporeans to continue learning, I will provide a one-off SkillsFuture credit top-up of $500 for every Singaporean aged 25 years and above. The top-up will be available for use from 1st October 2020. Unlike the earlier $500 credit, which had no expiry date, this top-up will expire in about 5 years, by end 2025. This is to encourage Singaporeans to take action early to learn new skills and to make the best use of this period of economic slowdown. Second, we want to enhance the role of enterprises in developing their staff. Enterprises know best the skills needed for their businesses to transform and can play a key role in helping their workers learn and apply new skills. By investing in their staff, they build a stronger workforce, which can in turn help enterprises succeed. So we must strive to achieve this virtuous cycle. A good example is Containers Printers, a local food packaging company. It has adopted digital technology and trained its workers to take on higher value-added roles like real-time monitoring of production. In our unique tripartite model, the labor movement plays a crucial role. We cannot keep jobs, enterprises, or even industries that are no longer viable. Instead, we refresh, retrain, and rejuvenate for the long term. For example, the United Workers of Electronics and Electrical Industries and Thales, a French technology leader, have set up a company training committee. Management staff and union members are working together to develop training plans and deepen skills so that workers can take on better jobs. On my visit to Thales, I was very heartened to hear how its employees are upskilling and contributing to Thales' transformation. This is a good example of how unions and enterprises can work together to keep workers up to date as enterprises transform. Let me outline 5 measures to enhance the role of our enterprises in the next bound of SkillsFuture. First, I will introduce the SkillsFuture Enterprise Credit to encourage employers to embark on the transformation of their workforce and enterprise in tandem. Employers can use this enterprise credit to defray 90% of out-of-pocket costs of business transformation, job redesign, and skills training. The SkillsFuture Enterprise Credit at $10,000 per enterprise will benefit over 35,000 enterprises, most of which will be SMEs. Second, we also provide more support for job redesign. The Productivity Solutions Grant supports enterprises to adopt pre-approved digital solutions and equipment. We will expand the Productivity Solutions Grant to include job redesign consultancy services. Third, we will work with large anchor enterprises to support training for their sectors and value chain partners. Anchor enterprises are supported by many SMEs. By helping to raise the skills of workers in these SMEs, the entire supply chain benefits. We aim to partner up to 40 of such anchor enterprises to benefit 4,000 SMEs over the next 5 years. Fourth, our IHLs will work with more enterprises to enable local students to learn in a real-world setting through the SkillsFuture work-study programs. We'll now more than double the capacity of these programs by 2025. Our aim is to make this a mainstream pathway, with 12% of each cohort going through these pathways, up from 3.5% today. Fifth, as more enterprises train their workers, we will deepen workplace learning capabilities. MOE launched the National Centre of Excellence for Workplace Learning, or NACE, at Nanyang Polytechnic in July 2018. MOE will expand NACE to 2 more IHLs over the next few years and aim to benefit over 1,200 enterprises, especially our SMEs. In line with our focus on the role of industry in SkillsFuture, we also recalibrate government's funding towards training providers and courses with a stronger link to job and wage outcomes. The third element in the next bound of SkillsFuture is a special focus on mid-career workers currently in their 40s and 50s. Born in the 1960s and 70s, they grew up in a time when our economy was just starting to take off. When they started work, it was normal, even celebrated, to stay with one job in one company for life. As enterprises restructure, the nature of jobs has changed. Many have adapted to these changes, picked up new skills, and even switched careers. Ms. Ng Lee Chun, 50, is one of them. After leaving her previous job, WSG helped her to secure a logistics role with ST Logistics. Through the Professional Conversion Program for Supply Chain Professionals, ST Logistics sent her for training for this role. Some workers in their 40s and 50s have not seen any job or career changes since leaving school, or had a chance to upskill earlier. But they are now facing greater competition from younger workers and workers overseas. I understand their anxiety. At the same time, with broader global shifts, exciting jobs will emerge. Our mid-career workers can seize these opportunities and do better for themselves and their families. The government will do more to support them. We'll introduce a new SkillsFuture mid-career support package for locals in their 40s and 50s to help them stay employable and move on to new jobs or new roles. We aim to double the annual job placement of locals in the 40s and 50s to around 5,500 by the year 2025. To reach this goal, we'll increase the capacity of reskilling programs. This will include the Professional Conversion Program under the Adapt and Grow initiative, career transition programs delivered by Continuing Education and Training Center, or CET centers like IHLs, and sector-specific programs like the Tech Skills Accelerator, company-led training for ICT jobs. In tandem, our employers must step up to recruit, retain, and retrain our local mid-career workers. We'll support them to do so. I will provide a hiring incentive to employers who hire local job seekers aged 40 and above through a reskilling program. For each eligible worker, the government will provide 20% salary support to the employer for 6 months, capped at $6,000 in total. In parallel, we'll streamline our manpower schemes, including support for hiring and retention, to maximize their impact. To improve access to reskilling programs, I will also provide a special SkillsFuture credit top-up of $500 to every Singaporean aged 40 to 60 in 2020. This will be over and above the top-up that I announced earlier. This additional credit can be used for selected reskilling programs or at CET centers. Like the broad-based top-up, this additional credits will expire in about 5 years to encourage early action. Apart from government support, we'll assemble a group of volunteer career advisors from professional communities. These advisors will provide peer-level support and career guidance to local workers in navigating professional pathways. We hope that all these initiatives will provide meaningful support to those in their 40s and 50s to further their careers with confidence. Lifelong learning and contribution does not stop at the 40s and 50s. As the Chinese say, 活到老学到老. You are never too old to learn. And as our people live longer, we'll provide more support to help them remain active and contribute to our society and economy. Many seniors have told us that they want to continue working and learning. Besides saving more for retirement, it is about a sense of agency and purpose and staying active and connected. The government has strongly supported enterprises that employ our seniors through the Special Employment Credits, or SEC, and the Additional SEC, or ASEC, and Work Pro. For our seniors who wish to work longer, earn more, and save more, PM had announced at last year's National Day rally that we are raising the retirement and re-employment ages. We're also increasing the CPF contribution rates for workers aged 55 to 70. To ease in these changes for employers and workers, I've introduced a senior worker support package comprising 4 measures. First, I will refashion SEC and ASEC into a senior employment credit, which will take effect from 2021. Like SEC and ASEC, the senior employment credit will provide employers with wage offsets when they hire Singaporean workers aged 55 and above, with the support levels tapering down over time as the retirement and re-employment ages are gradually raised. Second, when employer CPF contribution rates go up in 2021, we will provide employers with a CPF transition offset for the year to offset half of the increase in employer contributions. Third, we will introduce a senior worker early adopter grant to support enterprises that raise their own retirement and re-employment ages ahead of the legislated changes. Fourth, I will introduce the part-time re-employment grant to support and encourage enterprises to formalize part-time re-employment provisions. In short, even as we support workers' aspirations to work longer, we hear employers' concerns. As part of our unique tripartite system, the government has stepped up to support both our workers and our enterprises. Even for seniors who choose to retire but wish to continue to learn and stay active, the $500 SkillsFuture credit top-up that I just announced will support this. Retirees can use this to deepen their interests or even to explore a whole new area, be it cooking or coding. For many years now, foreign workers have been part of our workforce. With our declining labor force growth, foreign workers are a necessary complement. But we must regulate the inflow carefully in a way that creates opportunities for our locals. One area of particular concern is S-passes. There are skilled jobs, many of which can be done by locals, such as polytechnic diploma holders. We created the S-pass category because despite our best efforts, we are not producing enough of such skilled locals. S-passes enable enterprises to top up their workforce with more skilled workers and to recruit workers with particular skills that locals may lack. But S-passes should not be a means by which enterprises hire low-cost foreign workers when qualified locals are available. Last year, we announced cuts for dependency ratio ceiling, or DRC, and S-pass sub-DRC thresholds for the services sector. This was to manage manpower growth and encourage our enterprises to restructure and reskill our local workers. We have been monitoring the manpower growth closely. The number of S-pass holders in the construction, manufacturing, marine shipyard, and process sectors is growing. by 3.8% per year over the last 2 years. The number could increase significantly over the next few years as the construction and marine shipyard sectors recover and the process sector begins work on projects in the pipeline. However, the growth in S-Pass holders must be sustainable. The government has been working closely with industry and educational institutions to build up a pipeline of local manpower, including mid-career workers. We want them to have fair opportunities to grow while supporting the manpower needs of enterprises. Therefore, this year, we will take further steps. We will reduce the S-Pass sub-DRCs of the construction, marine, shipyard, and process sectors from 20% to 15%. We will face the cuts in 2 steps. The first step, from 20% to 18% on 1st January 2021, and subsequently to 15% on 1st January 2023. We are announcing the changes about a year ahead to give time for enterprises to adapt. Given the economic uncertainties, we will not reduce the S-Pass sub-DRC for the manufacturing sector at this point. But we do want manufacturing companies to make the effort to recruit local skilled workers and technicians too. Therefore, when conditions allow, we intend to tighten the S-Pass sub-DRC for manufacturing too. At the same time, we recognize potential concerns of enterprises about the availability of skilled manpower in these sectors. To help you find skilled local graduates looking to embark on their careers and older local professionals looking for new careers, SSG and WSG will work with you to improve matching. Enterprises that have specific needs can continue to apply for additional manpower flexibilities in exceptional cases through schemes such as the Lean Enterprise Development Scheme. In view of the economic conditions, I will maintain the foreign worker levy rates for all sectors for 2020. Mr. Speaker, sir, the government appreciates the concerns of our workers and enterprises. In the immediate term, we are facing headwinds with the shocks and uncertainties. But in the medium term, we are facing deep structural shifts in the global economy. We have to tackle both challenges head-on. The government will support our enterprises and workers with the near-term challenges through the Stabilization and Support Package for workers and enterprises. To tackle medium-term challenges, our transformation and growth strategy will support efforts to deepen enterprise capabilities, develop our people, and forge stronger partnerships through our tripartite structure. By positioning Singapore as a global Asian node of technology, innovation, and enterprise, we can ride on the next wave of structural changes resolutely. The respective ministers will provide more details of the schemes I've mentioned in this section earlier. Slightly over an hour, and I'm on to my second file. Mr. Speaker, sir, a vibrant economy provides good jobs and opportunities for Singaporeans and allows families to do well. It also gives us the resources to support our people with their needs to build a caring and inclusive home. Our tax and spending policies reflect our values. Over the past decade, we have significantly increased our social spending. Between 2010 and 2019, we tripled our healthcare expenditure from $4 billion to about $12 billion a year to meet the growing needs of our seniors and to ensure that every Singaporean has access to affordable and quality healthcare. We increased our investments in education from $10 billion to about $13 billion, so that all Singaporeans will have the best chance to fulfill their fullest potential. We increased expenditure on national development from $2.4 billion to $3.6 billion, with the bulk of this going into subsidies on public housing, so that every Singaporean household can have a home to call their own. Last year, we gave out about $1.1 billion in cash to Singaporeans who need more help. The payouts were provided through structural schemes, such as ComCare for the vulnerable, workfare income supplements for lower wage workers, and GST voucher cash for lower income Singaporeans, and silver support for the vulnerable elderly. This social spending reflects our commitment to invest in our people, to give every citizen a stake in our society, to care for our seniors, and to provide more help to those with less. This budget, we will continue to care for Singaporeans in the following ways. First, we will build on our efforts to support our families. Second, we will support and enable our seniors in their retirement years. Third, we will promote a stronger giving culture. I'll first touch on how we will further support our families. Good education provides a strong foundation for children to grow, realize their aspirations, and continue a journey of lifelong learning. We have committed to decisive shifts in the government's support for early childhood development. We are determined to give every child, regardless of circumstances, a good start in life. As PM announced at the National Day rally last year, we will step up efforts to improve the affordability, accessibility, and quality of preschool services. We have significantly enhanced preschool subsidies and made them available to more families from this year. We also increased the share of government-supported preschool places from just 50% today to 80% by around 2025. Overall, we are doubling our support for our young in their preschool years. In 2018, the government spent about $1 billion on the early childhood sector. Within the next few years, this will double to over $2 billion per year. In the primary to pre-university school years, education is already heavily subsidized for Singaporeans. Primary school is free for all Singaporeans, while the secondary school fee is $5 a month. Students pay a few dollars of miscellaneous fees. For students for lower income families, we'll provide further help. We will enhance the MOE Financial Assistance Scheme by raising the annual bursary quantum for pre-university students from $900 to $1,000. We also increase transport subsidies for all students and school meal subsidies for secondary school students. The Enhanced Financial Assistance Scheme will cost an additional $9 million per year, or a total of $52 million per year. We announced that we would enhance bursaries for diploma and degree holders last year. These bursaries are on top of subsidies that are provided to all Singaporeans. Starting from academic year 2020, students from lower and middle-income families in the polytechnics and autonomous universities can benefit from higher bursaries. We will also enhance bursaries for full-time ITE students from academic year 2020. Students from households who qualify under the lowest income tier for bursaries will now receive 100% fee subsidies on top of the cash bursary. Students from lower and middle income households will also benefit from an increase in the cash bursary quantum by up to $200 a year. The cost of bursaries for higher education will rise from $148 million per year to $198 million per year. A good education lays a strong foundation for a better future. This is why this government has been providing significant education subsidies for each child. A Singaporean child will receive over $180,000 of education subsidies in total by the time he turns 16. This includes about $50,000 in government subsidies over 5 years when they enroll in a full-day childcare program with one of the anchor operators. For those who come from less privileged backgrounds, there are additional subsidies for preschool, bursaries, and other financial assistance schemes. This substantial investment is how we maximize every child's potential, regardless of family circumstances. This is a promise that I, as former Education Minister and now Finance Minister, am committed to keep. When Singaporeans are ready to start a family and own a home, we make sure there is good access to quality and affordable housing. Last year, MND consolidated existing housing grants into an enhanced CPF housing grant. Under the enhanced housing grant, first-time flat buyers can enjoy up to $160,000 in housing grants. The monthly household income ceilings for subsidized flats and executive condominiums were raised to $14,000 and $16,000 respectively. We expect around 16,000 HDB households to benefit from these enhancements each year. The government has made significant moves to help Singaporeans manage major expenditures in life through structural subsidies in education, healthcare, and housing. This year, with the economic slowdown and uncertainties of the COVID-19 outbreak, we are mindful that many families are facing greater pressures. During my fellow MPs and my own walkabouts, people often tell us that they are worried about job security and rising expenditures. To help all Singaporeans with the household expenses during this period of uncertainty, I will provide a comprehensive care and support package for households amounting to about $1.6 billion. All Singaporeans aged 21 and above in 2020 will receive a one-off cash payout of $300, $200, or $100, depending on their income. The annual GST voucher USAVE provides rebates to help HDB households with their utilities expenses. This year, I will double the amount of USAVE rebates through a one-off GST voucher USAVE special payment to all eligible HDB households. This will help to free up cash for other household expenses. In addition, I will extend the service and conservancy charges rebate by another year. Eligible HDB households will receive rebates of between 1.5 and 3.5 months. Lower income Singaporeans will get additional help with their living expenses. In October 2019, we announced the Workfare Transport Concession Scheme and the Public Transport Voucher to help cushion the transport fare increases for lower income households. To further offset daily living expenses for lower income workers, I will provide a workfare special payment. Singaporeans who on workfare will receive 20% more for work done in 2019 with a minimum payment of $100. This will be given in cash. I will also help needy Singaporeans more directly. They will receive grocery vouchers worth $100 each year in 2020 and 2021 for use at major supermarkets. This directly helps needy households with one of their major cost of living items, food. There will be additional help for families taking care of children and elderly parents. I will provide a further $100 cash payout for every adult Singaporean with at least one Singaporean child aged 20 years and below this year. I will provide an additional GST voucher U-Save rebate for larger households with 5 or more members to help them with their utilities bill. Together with the U-Save special payments I mentioned earlier, larger households can receive a total of 2.5 times their regular U-Save rebates this year. These households can receive up to $1,000 in U-Save rebates depending on their flat type. I will also provide a $100 top-up to the Passion Card to all Singaporeans aged 50 years and above this year, including the Pioneer Generation and Merdeka Generation seniors. This can be used to pay for groceries, activities, and facilities at community clubs and more. Those who do not currently have a Passion Card can get one for free to receive the top-up. Our self-help groups have also been working closely with the community to help needy families and children. To enable them to do more, I will provide a $10 million grant to them over 2 years so that they can help more families. The Community Development Councils, or CDCs, have also played an important role in partnering the community to strengthen bonds and help vulnerable groups. Each CDC has its set of local assistance schemes to meet local needs and programs that allow community members to help those with extra needs. I will provide $20 million for the CDCs to do more and better meet the needs of their residents through local initiatives. Together, the Care and Support Package will provide a young family with about $1,300. A 3-generation family can receive more, about $1,800. More details are provided in the slide and in the annex. Let me now move on to the second area, which is to support and enable our seniors. Singaporeans are living longer. Our life expectancy at birth is close to 85 years, the longest in the world. This is a good thing. Singapore will not just be a great place to raise a family, but a great place for seniors to live a life of purpose, dignity, and contribution. The Community Networks for Seniors is now a national program with 650 active aging nodes to engage our seniors. We must see aging as a positive force and turn this phase of life into a time of opportunity. Aging with confidence includes having financial assurance in retirement. This can be achieved through a combination of individual efforts, family, community, and government support. Over the years, we have strengthened the 4 pillars of our social security system: home ownership, CPF, healthcare assurance, and income from workfare and silver support. We have also been enhancing the ComCare schemes, which support Singaporeans who are unable to work or have little or no family support. The CPF is a major scheme to enable Singaporeans to save enough for their retirement years. We need to keep on updating and improving our CPF policies over time so that they remain appropriate for each cohort. We've been adjusting the basic retirement sum, or BRS, regularly, in line with rising income levels. Since 2017, household incomes per capita have risen by an average of 4.1% per year in nominal terms, while the BRS has increased by 3% per year. The BRS is currently 90,500 for the cohort turning 55 this year. We'll continue to adjust the BRS by the same 3% per year for the next 2 cohorts. The BRS will be 93,000 for cohorts turning 55 in 2021 and $96,000 for those turning 55 in 2022. These modest continuing adjustments are necessary for the payouts to keep up with basic retirement expenses. With continuing wage growth, each successive cohort has been able to save more. We expect 7 in 10 actively employed persons from these two cohorts to be able to set aside their BRS, significantly more than 4 in 10 about a decade ago. More details are in the annex. Even as more seniors are prepared for retirement, one group of current seniors may not be able to meet their retirement needs. When they were younger, they earned less than working Singaporeans do today, even after adjusting for inflation. Some may have earned lower wages for most of their working lives. Others may have stopped work early to take care of family members. We are in a fortunate position that most of our seniors have housing assets that they can use to support their retirement if they wish. We'll do more to help Singaporeans tap on their housing assets for retirement by enhancing the Silver Housing Bonus and Lease Buyback Scheme. The Minister for National Development will provide more details. The CPF is a good retirement scheme based on personal savings. It provides Singaporeans with very favorable risk-free interest rates on their savings. Many Singaporeans want to top up their own, their spouses, or parents' CPF accounts. In 2019, such voluntary cash top-ups added up to about $1 billion. We would like to encourage more to do so, particularly those whose CPF balances are on the low side. To help those with less CPF savings to save more, I will introduce a matched retirement savings scheme from 2021 to 2025. Lower to middle income Singaporeans aged 55 to 70 who have not been able to set aside the prevailing BRS will be eligible. Under this scheme, the government will match every dollar of cash top-ups made to their CPF retirement account up to an annual cap of $600. This is a way of encouraging and augmenting family support for our seniors with fewer means and retirement. About 435,000 Singaporeans will be eligible. While the CPF is a good scheme, for a small segment of the elderly population, it will not be enough. Some had low incomes during their working years and currently have little or no family support. We created a silver support scheme to complement the CPF for this group and give them more financial security in retirement. This scheme is now almost 5 years old and the review is timely. Silver support currently provides cash payouts to the bottom 20% of Singaporeans aged 65 and above, with some support for those slightly above the bottom 20%. I will raise the quarterly cash payouts by 20%. For individuals living in smaller flats, this means that the cash payouts will increase from $750 to $900 per quarter. I will also broaden the eligibility criteria of silver support. I will expand the threshold for lifetime wages and per capita household income to cover more seniors. There will also be a new payout tier to provide a smaller payout to seniors whose monthly household incomes per person are above $1,300 but not exceeding $1,800. These seniors do not receive silver support today. There is no need to apply. Eligible seniors will be notified by CPF board and start receiving payouts under the enhanced scheme from December 2020. Overall, we expect about 100,000 more seniors to benefit from the enhanced silver support in 2021. The cost of silver support will nearly double from today's $330 million to to around $620 million in 2021. More details are provided in the annex. Here is an illustration of how the matched savings, right sizing, and enhanced silver support can add up to help a retired 65-year-old couple to more than double their retirement income. I'll pause here for members to take a look at the example, and details are in the annex. These enhancements underscore the government's commitment to provide seniors with greater assurance in retirement and reflect the values we hold dear, such as taking care of our parents and seniors. They also complement the other schemes for our seniors, such as the Pioneer Generation Package and Merdeka Generation Package. We also help seniors stay active and contribute to the community. Many senior volunteers find that volunteering gives them purpose, keeps them socially connected, and promotes active aging. The community also benefits from their wealth of experience and skills. There is Mr. Victor Lim, a 70-year-old retiree who spent 40 years in the medical imaging and IT industry and now volunteers at IMDA's Digital Readiness Program. There is also Madam Leong Suin, one of the oldest members of RSVP, who has been volunteering for over 20 years. Our success in taking care of every Singaporean, from preschool to retirement, is only possible with the support of our community partners. This brings me to the third strategy, strengthening the giving culture. When we harness and rally greater participation and resources from the community, we can better support those in need. The government will continue to support the community in building a stronger giving culture. Last year, I announced the Bicentennial Community Fund, which provides dollar-for-dollar matching for donations made to institutions of a public character. This is on top of the 250% tax deduction provided for donations made to IPCs. One of the potential beneficiaries is a Daughters of Tomorrow Limited, which helps disadvantaged women gain new skills and find employment. The organization plans to use the Bicentennial Community Fund to develop staff and volunteers and build their in-house fundraising capabilities. This year, the Ministry of Social and Family Development and the National Council of Social Service will set up the Community Capability Trust to fundraise and support our social service partners in enhancing their capabilities and capacities to serve the community. For a start, together with Tote Board, I will provide $200 million to the trust in FY 2020 and match up to $150 million in funds raised over the next 10 years. In total, we'll commit up to $350 million for the Community Capability Trust. This will provide a pool of funds that our social service agencies can tap on to transform themselves for the future. I hope they will make good use of this to strengthen their organizational capabilities, become more productive, and enhance the service infrastructure in partnership with MSF and NCSS. Just like our efforts in the industry transformation maps have positioned our enterprises and economy for the future, the Community Capability Trust will equip social service agencies to bring the social sector forward. Details are in the annex. There is much value to be gained when the community comes together in support of a cause. I'm happy to see the success of movements like the Purple Parade, the Purple Symphony, and Running Hour. These are ground-up initiatives that support inclusion and celebrate the abilities of persons with special needs through activities like music and sports. Everyone can play a part to build an inclusive society from their hearts, in ways big and small. Everyone can play a part to build an inclusive society from their hearts in ways big and small. Many enterprises have also built inclusive workspaces for persons with disabilities or PWDs. To support the employment of PWDs, the Special Employment Credits or SEC and the Additional Special Employment Credits or ASEC schemes provide wage offsets for employers hiring Singaporean PWDs earning below $4,000 a month. At the last budget, we extended the SEC and ASEC until end of 2020. We have received good feedback on the schemes in supporting PWD employment. In 2018, more than 5,700 employers hiring over 8,600 Singaporean PWDs benefited from SEC. This budget, I will introduce the new Enabling Employment Credit, or EEC, to provide stronger support for employers of persons with disabilities. The new EEC will replace the current SEC and ASEC schemes for PWD employment. It will be available for 5 years, from 2021 to 2025, at a cost of about $31 million per year. To ensure that EEC remains helpful for persons with disabilities to find employment and remain in the workforce, the government will review the EEC after 2 years and make adjustments if necessary. This budget, I will also top up 3 funds that provide targeted help for the elderly and lower income. I'll provide top-ups of $750 million to the Elder Care Fund, $500 million to the ComCare Fund, and $200 million to the MediFund. These funds provide a safety net for the low income by helping them to meet their daily expenses and healthcare fees. The respective ministers will provide more details of the schemes I mentioned in this section later. Mr. Speaker, sir, Budget 2020 supports the government's long-term strategy of building a caring and inclusive society. We will continue to support our families through the enhancements to our education and housing schemes and the ComCare and the care and support package for households. We will enable our seniors by promoting active aging and providing financial assistance, financial assurance. Let me reread that. We will enable our seniors by promoting active aging and providing financial assurance in their retirement years. We'll also partner the community to build a stronger giving culture so that we can better support those in need. This is our continued effort to improve the lives of our people and our future generations. We must continue to work together to build a society where opportunities are available to every Singaporean at every stage of life. Let me move on to how we can sustain Singapore's success for generations to come. Our pioneers set out to build a high-quality living environment, even when they had to attend to pressing economic and security challenges. They left us a legacy of a clean, green, and livable environment. As the Chinese saying goes, 前人种树，后人乘凉. The generation that planted the seeds does not fully benefit from their toil, but they care to do this for future generations to reap the fruits. In the same spirit, we must plant the seeds to secure a better future for generations to come. By thinking long-term, by confronting major challenges, and by investing for our future, we have beaten the odds. 3 major challenges we must continue to confront are climate change, security, and fiscal sustainability. To build a livable and sustainable home, we must address climate change. as a low-lying island nation, rising sea levels threatens our very existence. So what can we do as a small island nation? First, we must continue to support global efforts to combat global problems. Singapore must continue to do our part as a responsible member of the international community. Singapore plays an active role at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Besides representing our interests, Team Singapore is regarded as an honest broker, helping to build bridges and consensus. This year, we will update our commitments to the Paris Agreement and take a further step to chart our vision for a low-carbon, sustainable future Singapore. The Minister in the Prime Minister's office will elaborate on this later. Second, we must manage our transition to a low-carbon, low-emissions economy. We must turn our carbon constraints into a strength, just like how we have turned our water vulnerabilities into an area of strength with radical innovations in new water and desalination. Today, Singapore is a global hub of water research and innovation. The circular economy, turning waste into a resource that can be reused in the production cycle, is one way we can reduce our carbon footprint and open up new opportunities. NEA will soon begin a field trial to use new sand made from incineration ash in road construction along Tanah Merah Coast Road. We'll do more to develop new ideas and solutions. We're committing close to $1 billion for research in urban solutions and sustainability. The research will focus on renewable energy, cooling Singapore, and carbon capture, among others. As climate change is global, innovative solutions created here can be commercialized, turning our constraints into a strength. More broadly, we have to manage our greenhouse gas emissions by putting in place the right incentives, tax structures, and regulations. We introduced a carbon tax in 2019 and supported enterprises in improving energy efficiency. We introduced and enhanced the minimum energy performance standards to raise the energy efficiency of energy-intensive household and industrial appliances. The domestic transport sector contributes a significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Vehicles with internal combustion engines, or ICEs, also contribute to pollution, adversely affecting our health and quality of life. Many major cities have already set ambitious goals to phase out ICE vehicles and shift to cleaner technologies. Car manufacturers are actively developing cleaner engine technologies, such as hybrids and electric vehicles, or EVs, and are exploring new areas, such as hydrogen fuel cells. As a small city-state, we are able to and have strong reason to stay abreast of these major technological changes. For both public health and climate change reasons, we should progressively phase out the use of ICE vehicles towards cleaner alternatives such as hybrids and EVs. We'll set a long-term strategic goal for Singapore to achieve this. Our vision is to phase out ICE vehicles and have all vehicles run on cleaner energy by 2040. To promote this, we will have 3 measures in this budget. First, we will enhance incentives to encourage the adoption of cleaner and more environmentally friendly vehicles. In 2018, we introduced a vehicular emissions scheme for cars and taxis. Under the scheme, car buyers and taxi operators who choose cleaner car models can receive an upfront rebate of up to $20,000 and $30,000 respectively. We have seen promising results from the scheme. More car buyers and taxi operators are choosing environmentally friendly engines such as electric hybrids. Therefore, we'll introduce a similar scheme called a Commercial Vehicle Emissions Scheme for light goods vehicles. The Minister for the Environment and Water Resources will announce the details at the COS. For cars and taxis, I will provide an additional EV early adoption incentive. Those who purchase fully electric cars and taxis will receive a rebate of up to 45% on the additional registration fee, capped at $20,000. We also revised the road tax methodology for cars to better reflect the current trends in vehicle efficiency from January 2021. This will lead to an across-the-board reduction in road tax for EVs and some hybrids. Second, we will expand the public charging infrastructure for EVs. Today, there are about 1,600 charging points island-wide. We will work with the private sector to step up the deployment of chargers in public car parks. By 2030, we aim to deploy up to 28,000 chargers at our public car parks island-wide. Lastly, the government will take the lead. We will progressively procure and use cleaner vehicles to do our part for the environment. Here we are placing a significant bet on EVs and leaning policy in that direction because it is the most promising technology. It also requires a significant increase in demand to justify the infrastructure investment. This is a significant undertaking involving multiple agencies. The transition towards EVs will have a major impact on tax revenues. Fuel excise duties today yield around $1 billion per year and are significant contributors to government revenues. They are also a form of mileage tax, which discourages excessive driving, especially in private cars, and thus helps to reduce road congestion. But EVs do not pay fuel excise duties. Therefore, we will need to update our vehicular tax structure to preserve these two considerations. Ideally, we would like to implement a usage-based tax on EVs as an alternative to fuel excise duties. But the technology to do this properly on EVs is the next generation ERP system, and distance-based charging using ERP is still several years away. In the interim, we'll impose a lump sum tax that will be built into the road tax schedule for EVs to partly account for the loss in fuel excise duties. This lump sum tax will be phased in over 3 years, starting from January 2021, with the full quantum implemented by January 2023. Total road tax, after the revision in methodology and the new lump sum tax, will be higher for some EV models. However, EV buyers can expect to enjoy substantial cost savings because of the significant EV early adoption incentive. I spoke about policy measures that the government will put in place to reduce emissions. But the government alone cannot address the threat of climate change. Therefore, mobilizing all of us in this effort is the third thrust of our climate change strategy. Robert Swan, the first person to have walked to the North and South Poles, once said, and I quote, "The greatest threat to our planet is a belief that someone else will save it," unquote. To deal with climate change, we have to foster a climate of change in our community, where everyone, whether as an individual, as a business leader, or as a community leader, makes conscious decisions to lower our carbon footprint. One such decision by individuals is our choice of household appliances. To encourage households to purchase energy-efficient household appliances, we will introduce incentives to help lower-income households with the cost of these appliances. Outside our home, we earlier announced plans to add more greenery to our HDB estates. New housing developments will have around 45% to 60% green cover. Residents are contributing through the community garden movement. Today, more than 36,000 gardening enthusiasts are nurturing over 1,500 community gardens island-wide. These gardens keep our shared neighborhood vibrant and bring people closer together. To make sustainable living a key feature of our HDB estates, we'll have a new HDB Green Towns program. You have 3 key focus areas: reducing energy consumption, recycling rainwater, and cooling our HDB towns. I spoke about how we are committing to global efforts, managing our carbon constraints, and building a sustainable Singapore together. We must try hard, and we will do our part. But the cause of climate change depends on the commitment of all nations. The risk of rising sea level remains significant. So our 4th strategic thrust is to prepare our island for rising sea levels. The Minister for the Environment and Water Resources will elaborate on our immediate plans at the COS. PM mentioned at the National Day rally last year that climate change adaptation might cost $100 billion or more over 100 years. This is a major fiscal outlay in the coming years, so it is right and prudent that we set aside resources for this. I will set up a new coastal and flood protection fund with an initial injection of $5 billion. I will top it up subsequently whenever our fiscal situation allows. We must have the resolve to deal head-on with the existential threat of rising sea levels. Just as our pioneers planted the trees for us to enjoy today, we must protect our island for future generations to come. Our food security may also come under threat as imported supplies come under strain from climate change or geopolitical tensions. To improve our food resilience, the Minister for the Environment and Water Resources will provide more details of our Grow Local strategy at the COS to pursue our 30 by 30 aspirations. So CMOE has a 70 by 70 goal, and MEWR has a 30 by 30 goal. So together we'll have 100 upon 100. In uncertain times, there are many calls on our budget. However, we cannot take our peace, prosperity, and stability for granted. As a small city-state, we are particularly vulnerable to volatilities in our external environment. Securing our home remains a high priority in our budget and must be funded adequately. It is imperative that we continue to invest in our external, internal, cyber, and data security to keep Singapore and our families safe and secure. Diplomacy and deterrence are the twin pillars of maintaining Singapore's sovereignty. We strive to build good relations with our neighbours and international partners and to promote a rules-based world order. A strong Singapore armed forces supports our diplomatic efforts and ensures that other countries take Singapore seriously. We must be ever ready to defend our interests should negotiations fail. We must continue to draw a credible deterrence by maintaining our military and technological edge in a prudent manner that stretches every defense dollar. Back home, we are committed to protecting safety and our way of life. Our home team agencies will continue to enhance the operational readiness of their officers, leverage technology, and build partnerships with the community. Singaporeans share a strong conviction to look out for each other and to partner the home team to prevent and deal with terror threats and crises through the SG Secure movement. We must also be prepared to deal with cyber threats as digitalization becomes more pervasive. Our cyber capabilities have been raised significantly with the setting up of the Cybersecurity Agency, or CSA, in 2015, and the passing of the Cybersecurity Act in 2018. CSA is preparing measures for the next level of cybersecurity as we adopt more advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, cloud, and the Internet of Things. All of us, in the government, enterprises, and as individuals, will need to stay vigilant and strengthen our cyber and data security capabilities. Data security is also a vital prerequisite and a key enabler of Singapore's digital economy. It is key to preserving trust in the digitally connected world. We enacted the Personal Data Protection Act in 2012, and the Public Service has adopted comprehensive measures to secure and protect citizens' data. As we embark on initiatives to realize our smart nation ambitions, we must continue to enhance our cyber capabilities. I will set aside $1 billion over the next 3 years to build up the government's cyber and data security capabilities, to safeguard citizens' data and our critical information infrastructure systems. The respective ministers will provide more details of the schemes to confront the challenges of climate change and security. As we lay out our plans for economy, people, and environment, we must ensure these plans are fiscally sustainable so that we have the resources to deal with future needs and challenges. We must continue to plan our finances based on long-term structural drivers. Revenue flows are difficult to project accurately. We can end up having more or less. In this term of government, we happen to have more, mainly due to exceptional statutory board contributions from MAS and increased stamp duty collections. We use some of the unexpected surpluses to save ahead for anticipated needs and share some of the surpluses with Singaporeans. But we must not count on such revenue surprises to keep happening. We must anticipate long-term spending needs and be disciplined to raise revenues ahead of time so that we can continue to provide quality public services to all Singaporeans. At the same time, we must be mindful of the uncertainties and downside risks to our revenue. There are ongoing discussions to revise international tax rules under the Base Erosion and Profit Shifting Project, and we are actively participating in them. Our fiscal strategy must also be equitable. Major long-term infrastructure is lumpy and requires hefty upfront investments. But once built, they benefit many generations of Singaporeans. Borrowing for such developments allows us to distribute the cost equitably across current and future generations without the need for sharp increases in taxes. However, we must remain disciplined about our use of borrowing. We should continue to pay for recurrent needs like healthcare expenditure through recurrent revenues such as taxes. Our fiscal discipline has helped us to be among a select group of countries with a AAA credit rating. This, in turn, lowers borrowing costs of enterprises and households and promotes a virtuous cycle of economic growth. We must also maintain our fiscal posture and live enough to deal with unexpected shocks and longer-term challenges. The Constitution requires us to run a balanced budget over each term of government. We are being prudent to preserve fiscal buffers to ensure that we have the wherewithal to stand our ground and bounce back quickly if the tide turns against us. This is how we have been able to respond decisively to fight the COVID-19 outbreak and support Singaporeans and our workers. At the same time, to be able to set aside an assurance package for GST to help Singaporeans in the years ahead. The accumulated surpluses at the end of the term of government becomes part of our past reserves, which are invested. Today, the net investment returns contributions from our reserves is the biggest component of our revenue. the net investment return contributions from our reserves is the biggest component of our revenue. This is remarkable for a country with no natural resources of any kind. I'm making further changes to our tax system to strengthen its resilience while maintaining competitiveness. The details are in the annex. Let me summarize our overall budget position. For financial year 2019, we expect an overall budget deficit of $1.7 billion, or 0.3% of GDP. This deficit is $1.8 billion lower than the $3.5 billion deficit forecasted a year ago. This is due mainly to lower than expected expenditures arising from unforeseen project delays. When we exclude the government's top-ups to funds and net investment returns contribution from our reserves, we expect a basic deficit of $5.1 billion, or 1% of GDP. In the coming year, the Singapore economy faces considerable uncertainty because of heightened risks in the global economy and the rapidly evolving COVID-19 outbreak. Hence, for FY 2020, our budget position will be more expansionary, with a larger basic deficit of $12.3 billion. This, together with the stabilization and support package, will impart a considerable fiscal boost to the economy to address near-term concerns. On the whole, we expect an overall deficit of $10.9 billion, or 2.1% of GDP. With our fiscal prudence since the beginning of this term of government, we have sufficient accumulated fiscal surplus to fund the overall deficit in FY 2020. There is no draw on past reserves. Members have been very patient, and this is my third file. It's almost 2 hours now, so thank you very much. So before I start on the third file, some good news. My very dedicated staff in MOF, who worked day and night with me and over the weekends and Chinese New Year, managed to trim and trim the speech and grow the substance. So the substance have grown, but the speech is more concise now. We have moved all the details to the annexes. It's a pity because there were so many inspiring stories that I wanted to share with you, but I hope they will find many opportunities to share these stories. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, let me thank my excellent staff for contributing to a significant improvements in our productivity here. Mr. Speaker, sir, we will face more complex challenges ahead. But we are in this for the long haul. We can succeed only if we work together. Our ongoing fight against the COVID-19 outbreak is a testament of how we can work together. Our healthcare workers and frontline officers are giving their all to keep us safe and care for those who are unwell. And others, community groups, enterprises, and many volunteers have stepped forward. Everyone has something to offer, and every action makes a difference. This is the spirit of the Singapore Together movement, which I launched last June, to build a democracy of deeds, mobilize the creative energies and commitments of Singaporeans, find common cause, and beat the odds together to build our future Singapore. We have made a concerted effort to involve Singaporeans and stakeholders in our strategic deliberations and budgeting process. Over the course of Budget 2020 consultations, my colleagues and I met almost 1,000 leaders from different parts of society, including our unions, enterprises, social sector, and youths. It was a very enriching experience for everyone, and I thank every participant. Some of you will recognize your ideas in the budget. For example, we enhanced the internationalization support schemes after receiving feedback from TACs, such as the Singapore Manufacturing Federation and the Association of Banks in Singapore. We provided more resources to support our people to take action, to reduce carbon footprint. After several youth leaders I met suggested this. I also thank the talented students from Nanyang Polytechnic for the artistic illustrations in my slides today. Many Singaporeans are coming up with and acting on ideas to make Singapore a better place. The youth movement has been particularly strong. In the area of climate change, youths like Ms. Cheryl Lee and her team in the Singapore Youth for Climate Action has been organizing activities to encourage youth to take action through simple lifestyle choices. Ms. Rohini, daughter of Ravindran, is also contributing to the community by conducting photography and videography sessions for lower-income youth to develop their problem-solving skills and build a good foundation for them to excel. In 2016, we set up our Singapore Fund to provide funding support for ground-up efforts in the social domain. Since then, the OSF has committed nearly $4.3 million to support over 240 ground-up projects in culture, heritage, arts, and sports. One example is Progress Nest, started by Mr. Akram Hanif, to support children from low-income families. Through these partnerships, we have been able to do more and do better. And we are committed to making partnerships an integral part of how we will build our future Singapore. I will set aside $250 million to give greater momentum to our partnership efforts. I will top up the Our Singapore Fund and extend the fund beyond 2020 to support more ground-up initiatives that Singaporeans are passionate about across a wider range of domains, as in the annex. The government is committed to expanding and scaling up successful ground-up projects, such as those supported by our Singapore Fund. The Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources will also be launching an SG Eco Fund to support partnerships with the community and enterprises in our sustainability efforts. Channeling the energies of our people to key causes requires us to identify the challenges of our time. These challenges are multifaceted and multidimensional, but they are ultimately about how Singapore remains exceptional in an increasingly complex world. The solutions will also come in all shapes and forms from all levels of society, from government policies to individual efforts on the ground. We must overcome these challenges and find solutions together. The government will work with agencies and key stakeholders to identify major societal challenges. This will help us focus our collective efforts on the challenges that matter and allow us to galvanize good ideas and solutions from the public. We have issued several national innovation challenges to date in the areas of energy, land and livability, aging, urban mobility, and AI-enabled healthcare. For example, our AI Healthcare Grand Challenge is drawing strong interest here, and with partners from France and Germany. Under the National Innovation Challenge in Aging, we sought ideas to combine different technologies to enable aging in place and deploy these solutions at the precinct level. While we are only in our initial phases, we have learned useful lessons and seen encouraging results. We'll issue more specific challenges to encourage ground-up participation. This includes challenges in the social sector, where we have built many community partnerships to better support children from low-income and vulnerable families and promote youth mental well-being, amongst other things. The respective ministers will provide more details of the schemes I've mentioned in this section later. I'm excited about the prospect of stronger government-citizen partnerships in overcoming these challenges and look forward to the results these partnerships will yield. As this budget has many measures, MOF has prepared a booklet summarizing the measures, which I hope colleagues will find useful. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, may I ask the clerks to distribute this to all members of this House?
Yes, please.
Mr. Speaker, sir, let me say a few words in Mandarin before I conclude in English. 2019
The 2019 COVID has brought a lot of uncertain factors in the whole world. The virus does not respect any nationality, and the efforts to control it cross the borders. Many governments, international organizations, researchers, and healthcare workers are working together. China has adopted a series of highly effective measures. The early success of China in this effort will help the whole world. Under the current circumstances, there's widespread impact to our economy. Some sectors have already been affected, and Singaporeans are worried about their employment. I can understand that. In order to reduce the pressure on the corporations and our people, I will introduce $4 billion of stabilization and support package in order to help Singaporeans and family. I will also introduce $1.6 billion of care and support package. We have enough resources to meet present challenges, and that's because we have been well prepared and adopted measures early on and accumulated our reserves in order to meet the unexpected expenditure. Whether we can successfully overcome this challenge would depend on whether Singaporeans can look after one another, ensure social cohesion, and in the face of many uncertainties, it is natural that many people will be worried. But we should not panic. We should look after ourselves, our personal hygiene, and think about those who are around us. At the same time, we must adopt concrete actions to help those who are in need. The budget is a long-term strategic plan to ensure that Singapore can continue to develop, that Singaporeans can have a better life. In overcoming our short-term challenges, we must also pay attention to the long-term structural changes and ensure that these challenges bring about opportunities that we can exploit. First of all, we must continue to encourage transformation of enterprises and create more opportunities for Singaporeans. As they say, there is no end to learning. We must, through our SkillsFuture future skills, to encourage lifelong learning, lifelong benefiting from this learning. We'll continue to this mid-career career change package to ensure mid-career or mid-life Singaporeans to learn new skills and take on new jobs. Secondly, we want to encourage a society with inclusivity and concern and care. I mentioned that in 2021 we'll maintain GST at 7% in order to meet the incessant increase in healthcare. We have to raise GST before 2025. When we revise GST upwards, we will ensure that low-income families can cope with it and will provide more support. I will provide a 6 billion assurance package for GST and strengthen our present permanent GST voucher scheme. Thirdly, we must continue to develop Singapore, look after Singapore's security and stability, and ensure that we have a sustainable fiscal system. This is what we must commit to our future generations. Especially in the area of climate change, I will provide $5 billion to provide this coastal and floods protection fund. Fourthly, we will work together with Singaporeans to develop our country, to build what is our own home. There's a saying, the young will be educated, the old will be cared for. We hope that Singapore will not only be a good place for children, and it will also be a place where our seniors can have a dignified and meaningful life. We will improve our silver bonus scheme to help the lower income seniors to cope with their daily expenses so that their lives will have better protection. In addition, we will introduce this top-up scheme for retirement accounts to allow the CPF members who do not have very high CPF balance. We also encourage our senior citizens to have an active life after retirement. At present, the global situation is uncertain, and many countries face structural changes. From the long-term point of view, dealing with this sudden appearance of the virus is only one of the challenges that we encounter as we go forward. We cannot stagnate because of this. Together, we have to work and march towards a common objective. As they say, working together, facing the future, we must collect ideas from all quarters, and hand in hand, we can solve all problems and create a better Singapore.
Mr. Speaker, sir, there are deep structural shifts taking place in the world today, coupled with near-term concerns over economic uncertainties and the COVID-19 outbreak. All nations, big or small, will have to devise strategies and mobilize their people to navigate these changes and turbulence. Singaporeans have enjoyed more than half a century of stability and prosperity because we have seized the opportunities from an increasingly open and interconnected world. Every decade or so, when the test comes, we have rallied and passed them together. In this budget, I've outlined our plans not only to help our people deal with near-term challenges, but also to better enable Singaporeans of all ages to thrive in the new decade. The Stabilization and Support Package, costing $4 billion, will help viable enterprises and our workers during these uncertain times. Our transformation and growth efforts, costing $8.3 billion over 3 years, will support our longer-term plans to position Singapore as a global Asian node of technology, innovation, and enterprise. The care and support package, costing $1.6 billion, will support our households and alleviate concerns over costs of living. This is on top of the structural social subsidies given to Singaporeans in healthcare, education, and housing. We'll continue to take steps towards climate change mitigation and adaptation to ensure that in the decades ahead, our children and children's children will have a safe and livable Singapore. I'm confident that together, we can ensure that Singapore remains exceptional. As one Singapore, we'll grow our economy and transform our enterprises, creating opportunities for Singaporeans. As one Singapore, we'll care for and nurture Singaporeans at every stage of their lives to build a caring and inclusive society. As one Singapore, we'll build a livable and sustainable Singapore in the face of climate change, secure our sovereignty as an independent nation, and ensure our fiscal sustainability. As one Singapore, we'll work together with fellow Singaporeans to build a nation and a home we'll always call our own. Our nation has built up the capital, financial, human, and social, to go this distance. The Singapore spirit is strong and growing. Together, we will advance as one Singapore. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move.
Question is that Parliament approves the financial policy of the government for financial year 1st April 2020 to 31st March 2021. In accordance with paragraph 1 of Standing Order number 89, the debate now stands adjourned.
Delivering his budget speech for 2020. Now, calling this year's speech our unity budget, Minister Heng outlined the $106 billion financial plan to chart Singapore's future with confidence amid global uncertainty. Now, he cited the coronavirus crisis, geopolitical tensions, and economic shifts, amongst others, to have a significant impact on Singaporeans. Now, Minister Heng announced that he will deploy financial resources to 4 different categories, namely to stabilize and support, to transform and grow, to care and for, to nurture and to build and secure our future together. And the government will provide a stabilization and support package amounting to $4 billion. Now, under it, there will be schemes to help enterprises retain their local workers. The sectors directly affected by COVID-19 will also get additional support, like in the form of property tax rebates and rental waivers. And as part of a $1.6 billion care and support package, all adult Singaporeans will receive up to $300 in a cash payout, and eligible HDB households will receive double the current amount of utilities rebates. Now, for seniors, Budget 2020 will increase retirement support for them by enhancing housing monetization schemes, introducing a matched retirement savings scheme, and enhancing the Silver Support Scheme. Minister Heng also said that the GST rate increase will not take effect in 2021. It will remain at 7%. The government will provide an assurance package when the GST rate is raised. This will be a $6 billion package for Singaporeans to cushion the increase. And to prepare the country for climate change, a $5 billion coastal and flood protection fund will be set up to protect our coast against rising sea levels. Now, other environmental measures announced earlier today will foster cleaner energy transporting, including the electrical vehicle adoption incentive. Mr. Heng also said that on the whole, he expects an overall budget deficit of $10.9 billion or 2.1% of GDP. And that was a quick wrap of this year's budget speech. It's back to Rachel for a more in-depth discussion. Rachel?
Thanks, Dylan. And in our show today, we'll focus on these 4 issues from the budget speech. Singapore's coronavirus measures, the initiatives that will benefit each individual Singaporean, transforming for our future, and sustainability efforts to combat climate change. And to digest the budget measures announced in these areas, let's bring in our experts once again. Alvin Liew, a senior economist from UOB. Chu Woon Hong, tax partner from KPMG. Dr. Gillian Goh, Deputy Director, NUS Institute of Policy Studies, and Vikram Khanna, Associate Editor of the Straits Times. So thank you all for joining us once again. First, I'd like to ask each of you, perhaps starting with Vikram, what are your thoughts from this year's budget? How would you summarize it, perhaps in 3 words? What are your key takeaways?
3 words. Okay, I mean, there was a hell of a lot to digest. I mean, it's a 2-hour plus budget. But if you give me just 3 words, I would say it's generous. I mean, that's obvious from the size of the deficit. It's comprehensive. And it's at the same time, it's targeted. So so targeted means it attacks the problem that companies are going to face as a result of the coronavirus downturn. It targets which sectors will be affected. But at the same time, it also offers protection to all companies and Singaporeans on a very broad scale. So that's why it's both targeted and comprehensive. And of course, it's generous.
Thank you, Vikram. And we'll go into that a little bit deeper later, but I'll go on to Gillian first. Gillian next. So how would you summarize the budget? What are your 3 key takeaways or 3 words that you would describe?
I think assurance, certainly with respect to the COVID effect, there is the job support scheme that hopefully will make employers keep their employees in place. There's also the assurance that comes from knowing that the GST increase will not happen anytime soon, but money is put aside and the assurance is given that there will be offset measures, and there are details to that. Assurance also for retirees and senior workers, so there's enough there to incentivize putting money aside for retirement, but also to keep seniors in place. So I think assurance is the first key word that I would put in there. The second is inclusive. So you see that there's quite a lot for also people with disabilities, with now the enabling employment scheme, which is a rejig of what used to be the special employment scheme. But also inclusive because there's the our Singapore Fund, which is going to be a lot of money to promote partnerships, government partnerships, because people on the ground will know better how things have to be done in order to include more people. And I think the third word I would give is indeed very specific and targeted. There are very many schemes. So in a way, it may be a bit confounding as to which scheme might fit you. And I don't know whether there will be someone on the ground, a bureaucrat or people to kind of triage the system so that you know as a worker or as a person with disabilities or a senior or a company what you'll be able to tap.
Thanks, Gillian. And perhaps we could go over to Woo Hong, maybe just to briefly summarize, what are your 3 key topics?
When I was going through and listening to the budget, keywords came to me. It's a very comprehensive budget, assuring like what you said, and definitely everyone is being looked after. Singaporeans, jobs, workers, companies, no one is left out. So it gives us a very assuring feeling that the government is very decisive and know what to do in these very challenging times.
And Alvin, what are your key takeaways?
From the economist's point of view then, something slightly shorter, I hope. There is short term, which is what the COVID was to deal with the COVID, and there's always the long term. And at the end of it, this is an expansionary budget, more expansionary than what we had expected.
Well, thank you. And we'll move over to the first topic of today. So COVID-19, better known as the novel coronavirus, has rippled shockwaves across the globe. So far, there are a total of 77 cases here in Singapore, and Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has said that the impact on the economy already exceeds SARS and that a recession is possible. Businesses, workers and households are all expected to be badly affected by the fallout of the virus. And let's hear more from Finance Minister Heng Keat on measures introduced in this year's budget to support businesses and the economy.
Our foremost concern is jobs. We want to help our workers retain their jobs and use any lull period to upgrade their skills and be ready when the upturn comes. As NTUC Secretary General Ng Chee Meng and his union leaders said, every worker matters. I would therefore provide a stabilization and support package amounting to $4 billion. To help our workers stay employed, I'll support enterprises by defraying their wage costs through two schemes.
Well, the two schemes that Minister mentioned are the Job Support Scheme to provide one-off wage support to help enterprises retain their local workers. This will cost the government $1.3 billion. The second scheme is an enhancement of the wage credit scheme to support wage increases for Singapore workers. These, along with enhanced redeployment programs and cash flow support for enterprises. Now let's turn to our panel of experts to find out their thoughts on the measures. So perhaps, Woo Hong, I can start with you. What are your thoughts on the job support scheme and the enhancement to the wage credit scheme?
Okay. For the job support scheme, it is a one-off wage subsidy support, and it comes at a very timely manner in such a way that it's a very broad-based. Sectors that are affected will be benefited from it. So it's not so targeted, but it's very broad-based. Whereas the wage credit scheme is a bit of looking forward to the future. It defrays the cost of rising wages. So you can see that the government is focusing most on the short term and also not forgetting the long-term wage increase cost that company may face. So it's a very well thought through kind of strategy and plan.
Any comments, Alvin?
Well, if you look at it, the first thought that came to my mind is I compare it with 2009 because this is very similar to the scheme that was announced. But the difference, of course, at that point, right, the face value of it, right, that one was a $4.9 billion, I would call it bazooka. This one in this form itself, right, on the wages part, right, it's much smaller at 1.3 billion. But I think there is a difference right now because at that point, right, we were facing a dire consequences with quite significant economic impact. Right now, the time is uncertain. There is economic impact, but it is not to the extent that what we have experienced in 2009, at least not yet. So you can see that the measured portion of the implementation of the measure itself is, to me, I think it's taking out from the old rule book something that to help something that could be a short-term issue. Beyond this, right, if it turns to be something slightly more deadly, slightly more long-term, the virus stays with us in a more malignant manner, right, then I would assume that down the road, I can't deny that there might be a chance of a supplementary budget to face this problem. But right now, I think this is more than enough.
And that's similar to what we saw in SARS as well. It was an out-of-budget measure.
The one that we saw in SARS, pretty much, yeah.
And Vikram, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the priority here was job protection, to keep employers from retrenching workers, and this is an incentive for them to keep workers on their rolls. It's also a demand-boosting measure. You'll have the workers work longer. They'll have more money to spend. There'll be more demand in the economy. But that said, I'd agree with Alvin that this is a very short-term measure. This is a 3-month program, 3 months, $1.3 billion, and we can't be sure that this coronavirus crisis will not stretch beyond 3 months. And I think we have to ask, then what? The other question I would have is that, okay, I mean, I think employers might be incentivized to keep employees on their rolls. But if the crisis lingers on, I think you could have retrenchments despite the support because companies have no choice. In that case, I think we have to ask what will come if the crisis lingers. So I think Alvin mentioned that there probably may have to be a supplementary budget, but I think we'll have to keep our eyes open for that possibility, and we hope it doesn't happen. The other striking thing, of course, is that there are a lot of these one-off measures in this budget. So there's the job support is a one-off 3-month thing. There's working capital loans is a 1-year thing. Property tax rebates are 1 year. Then there's corporate tax rebates also 1 year. And even for the workers, like work for income supplements, so it's also one-year sort of increase. So I think the focus is very much that, look, let's concentrate the measures on the short-term problem that we are facing. A lot of these COVID-related measures are short-term focused. So yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, that's how, rather than sort of, and it's also cheaper, obviously. I mean, you can't have things that go on forever.
And if we were looking at a longer term fallout from COVID, I mean, what are some of the other, I guess, incentives perhaps you would have liked to have seen from the budget for COVID-19?
The longer incentive will be to how to ensure that employers will continue to hire the workers, right? And that is what we can see, that the government is giving out the senior employment credit scheme to retain older workers to work longer, and that is one way to preserve the workforce, and also the courses that they have to attend, to upskill themselves. That will be more long-term focus.
I think just going into more, I guess, sector-specific help. So we saw help for tourism, aviation, retail, food services, point-to-point transport. Any sectors that perhaps they might have missed out, or that you would have liked to have added into that?
I think we see this as, for this specific COVID outbreak itself, right? Definitely, right, the sectors that are named, right, are the first in line to get hit. But of course, the problem is how long is this virus going to hang around? If it extends more than the period of, say, 3 months, right, then your secondary other industries are going to get hit. For example, like manufacturing. That means that the problem persists in China. Supply chains are going to be disrupted longer than expected, and therefore manufacturing here is going to be impacted. And then those sectors that are going to be impacted in the longer run, right, it's going to need more help. And we also be mindful that China is a key investor in this area, and if their problem persists and their investments are delayed, right, then somebody has to step in to elevate the situation. We can't have a year where our investment just drop off the cliff and expect it to go back up normal. So there must be some measures. But again, this is all dependent on how persistent and how protracted this outbreak could be. For now, it is seen as, I think from the numbers I look at it, right, based on the budget, right, it looks like the perception is it could be a shorter term problem. They are probably basing it on the length of no longer than SARS.
But SARS was 8 months.
It depends, because SARS for us, we were declared SARS-free somewhere before the middle of the year by WHO. So I technically call that our end of episode for SARS at least.
Yeah, but the SARS crisis itself,
yes,
lasted 8 months. We've only gone 2 months, and I think you're right. I think we have to be concerned also about manufacturing, which by the way is already being hit. The supply chains have already been disrupted, and manufacturers in Singapore are already finding shortages of components. I think Business Times ran some stories on that. And when manufacturing gets hit, then it spreads into trade-related services, for example, wholesale trade, and then it becomes a sort of a demand shock, across the economy. So now this is already happening. Then there's also the slowdown in ASEAN, because ASEAN countries are also affected by the same problem. Their supply chains are also affected, and our sales to ASEAN will also go down. So it's not just a China problem, it's also a broader regional problem. So it becomes a little more complicated, much more complicated the longer it goes on.
And so, I mean, moving away from businesses, Gillian, what were your thoughts in terms of the measures and what impact or what the response would be from, I guess, your average Singaporean?
Well, I think if you look at what else is in the care and support package, then for low-wage workers, there's a sort of enhancement of the workfare payment that's helpful. There is a small measure for grocery vouchers. I think that's going to be helpful. The GST vouchers are enhanced, so there's more payout and more support for rebates and service and conservancy charges. But I think really if the impact is longer term, and businesses do have to sort of downsize or close, then I think the minister said that workers should take advantage of this time to reskill, to pick up new skills. And so you've seen two boosters to that aspect in terms of the SkillsFuture framework. One, that there would be a top-up to SkillsFuture, and then there's the second one, which is to facilitate mid-career moves. That's another booster specifically to enhance what's in the SkillsFuture package for people between 40 and 60 years old. And then incentives for companies to hire them as well. So presumably there might be some pain for different companies, but there'll be other companies that are moving into the industry or wishing to grow. So they'll have quite a lot of help on the worker skilling side, and also bringing in new workers to help them grow their companies. And so for the average person, then I think really we're hoping that they will feel a little bit of optimism that if they wanted to switch out to a different industry or sub-industry, they'd take advantage of this help and move.
Now's the time to transform yourself.
Nobody wants to do that, but if you have to, then there is that support, I think. But businesses themselves have to kind of do some heavy lifting themselves, right?
Yeah, well, thanks to our panelists. Let's check in with Gillian. It's time to hear what you've all got to say about the government's measures and to deal with the fallout of the coronavirus outbreak. Gillian, what have you got for us on social media?
Well, thank you, Rachel. Now, well, it's true, I've been keeping my eye on our Facebook and Twitter, as well as our YouTube pages, and the comments and questions are coming in, so do, of course, keep them coming in. Now, we have a couple of interesting ones. Let's pull some of them out. We have the first one from Muhammad Firdaus, who asked, what if the COVID-19 situation lasts for a year, and are these measures actually enough? I think that's a really interesting point over there. Let's bring up another one. We also have Mr. Govind Singh on Facebook, who has a question about the Jobs Support Scheme. How is it different from the Jobs Credit Scheme that was announced in Budget 2009 in response to the 2008 financial crisis? Now, any of our panelists, would you like to, any thoughts about that?
Yeah.
Vikram?
Okay, the first one was, how is this, what happens if it lasts for a year? And will these measures be enough? I think we pretty much decided no, they will not be enough. You will need a supplementary budget or something. The second question, how is this different from the Jobs Credit Scheme in Budget 2009? Well, qualitatively it was the same, in the sense that it was a wage subsidy, right? But the Jobs Credit Scheme of 2009 was, as I recall, it was bigger. It was bigger. It was not a 3-month scheme. It was a longer scheme, and it was a 12% wage subsidy. This is an 8% wage subsidy. Although the cap for the 2009 scheme was, I think, $2,500, and this is $3,600. So qualitatively the same scheme, but this is of shorter duration, and the percentage is smaller. Percentage of wage subsidy is small.
And one key difference was during 2009, there was a request to do a drawdown from reserves in response to the crisis. And that was, it fit the criteria where that was a dire circumstance. So if you use that as a benchmark to currently, this is, there is great uncertainty, but we have not reached the point that it is a dire circumstances, I think, just to paraphrase the word.
So I think it has to be quite an informed response. I think we have 70-some cases, but also the mortality rate is very low outside of Wuhan or Hubei. So we're looking at a 0.2% mortality rate. Of course, every person you lose is terrible, but then outside of Wuhan, it's much smaller. So I think the key thing is, what is our connection, not to China, but specifically to some of the provinces that are hit, and how does that affect supply chains? And so I think it has to be quite an informed position. So 3 months, might be something that you take right now. Nobody sees this going in a very large scale to a year, I think.
So if this were to persist, right, then our usual normal supply chain has to be relooked at. We should look at other countries.
But it seems to be very kind of specific rather than hugely global.
Supply chains is, to relook at supply chains is much easier said than done. If we look at some of the, how supply chains are linked, right, I think there's some simple way of looking at it. I can't remember what's the chart, but China forms like 90% of supply chains currently, or at least for Asia. And if you look at by country basis, if without needing external supplies going into a place, right, I think China is the only one that can produce something without external supplies. So by that measure, right, if China's supply chains are impacted, right, nobody can really replace them in that short order of things.
So I guess the question is Singapore's exposure to that, and specifically to Hubei, rather than all of China, right?
The Hubei is probably an important province, but the lockdown itself has expanded to various key other cities and other places within China itself. So the question mark is whether are we going to see, like in March itself, much of these places, except for maybe Hubei, comes back to regular operations. It's I know we are deviating a bit more from the budget, but this is really a key uncertainty. Putting it at 3 months is probably correct for the better judgment right now. But as we approach to the middle of the year, we probably can see that more needs to be done, or less, depending on the situation.
I think just to take off on that point, I mean, the issue is now what happens when the Chinese workers who had gone home for Chinese New Year
able to come back.
Able to come back. Okay, at some point they will have to come back. At the moment, there's travel restrictions and quarantines, which are going to some sources like New York Times say affecting more than 700 million people. But at some point, this has to change. The workers have to come back, and what happens then? Do the cases go up? The cases start going up again. You know, now at the moment the cases seem to be tailing off, at least in Hubei. But when the workers return to normal work and the economy starts moving again, and people are interacting as normal, or what will happen?
I guess that's why the Ministry of Manpower is very specific. You need actually permission. Each company needs to seek permission before it brings in
the workers. But you know, they have to at some point, they can't keep denying permission. They have to at some point allow the economy to start moving. So they have to move from a strategy of containment to mitigation. They have to move, and that's a bit of a risk. And the other thing is, of course, it's psychology that matters. I mean, even if the cases, even if the death rate, the fatality rate is low, this thing is very contagious. You know, people are concerned about that, and they restrict their own activities, and that causes a decline in economic activity generally. And this is happening even here. You go out, you see restaurants, malls, all. I mean, it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, but I think we'll bring it back to the budget. I think because of the current situation, I mean, it is extraordinary times, and we could talk for some time about what's happening with COVID-19 for the moment. So we'll check in with Dylan later for more questions and comments. And, you know, we've heard the measures that the government is going to roll out to help the economy, businesses and certain sectors during the COVID-19 crisis. Now let's take a closer look at the initiatives being rolled out from this year's budget for Singaporeans.
I announced in 2018 that we plan to raise the GST by 2 percentage points to 9% sometime from 2021 to 2025. This is to raise recurrent revenues to meet our recurrent spending, particularly for healthcare. After reviewing our revenue and expenditure projections, and considering the current state of the economy, I've decided that the GST increase will not take effect in 2021. In other words, the GST rate will remain at 7% in 2021.
So under the assurance package for GST, every adult Singaporean will receive a cash payout of $700 to $1,600 over 5 years. And I think quite a few people were relieved that the GST hike was put on hold for now, but we did see a $6 billion figure in this year's budget that's being pulled out now for use later on. Alvin, I know that you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, of course, it initially came across a bit, the timing was a bit off for me, that you postponed the hike, the GST hike, but then you put into a package. But of course, it's a preemptive measure in that sense that you were going to offset. And it's also probably a quite clear signal that the deferment is temporary because of short-term disturbances or shocks in the...
Have we seen a measure like this before?
Frankly, I don't remember so, but if you compare it, the comparison I heard was that, think of it like the Merdeka package, that it was being delivered across the years. But of course, this is to defer a GST hike that is not taking place yet. So I guess there is still, to me, quite a material difference.
Yeah, I think the message is giving assurance to the Singaporeans that in these difficult, challenging times, the GST hike is not going to happen in 2021, but in other years that come along. And also give the assurance to the Singaporeans that the help is on the way in terms of GST vouchers and other things. So these play a very important psychological effect in when everything's challenging and not going very well.
Well, I mean, it's a very big package. 6 billion is a lot of money, and you would have to split it up. You can't give it all at once. So you'll have to do some this year, some next year, and some the year after. And by doing it this way, you're able to be much more generous in what you give out. So for example, there are offsets for everybody, but there's special offsets for certain categories of people. So like I think the lower income people get 10-year offsets for GST. So you're able to do this because you're able to have a big package, and if you have a big package, you have to spread it out.
I think the issue of a GST rise will certainly emerge in an election, which is due quite soon. I think, well, we certainly know it has to be held by April next year. And so by saying to Singaporeans that there is this offset package, it's locked away, I think it'll change the debate a little bit, because politicians will be saying, well, there's going to be this GST rise, how will you be affected? Well, then the answer from the PAP camp is to say, this is how we are going to help you. And we maintain the framework of the fiscal policy being not regressive, but one that is progressive, in the sense that those who are in lower income households will be helped even more. But there is a broad-based offset. So it changes the political discussion a little bit. It doesn't, it sort of isn't just left hanging, where opposition politicians go, well, what's going to happen to you if there's a GST rise?
That's a good
the
point.
PAP actually says we've maintained our principle that it's not a regressive move. We always have to see this as a fiscal package.
And so they've called this a unity budget. Would you also call this an election budget then?
Well, as I said earlier, I think that whatever help is given to demonstrate by the government that it's concerned for all segments of Singapore, whether it's a COVID situation, which is short term, but longer term, there's all that help with education, preschool, certainly right up to tertiary education, and also with retirement. I think these are all things that the PAP government would want to signal, to say that there is concern for everyone, and it'll be helpful for short term as well as long term, as well as come that day, polling day, helpful for an election as well.
Okay, now, earlier we spoke about the need to upskill the workforce, and I know we mentioned it briefly during the COVID-19 discussion earlier on, and a new SkillsFuture enterprise credit has been announced. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, to me, if you are not just focusing on the employer, but you're just employee, but you're now targeting on the other side of the equation, which probably makes sense, that try to incentivize the employer to look at this as not just benefiting the employee, or you give them the idea that his skills are better, then it will better benefit your company. But now you're doing something financially tangible to them to incentivize them. I think that's a good way of at least pushing this plan forward, both from the employee side and the employer side.
This is to tackle the issue from the demand and the supply side, so that the employers will find incentivized and encouraged to employ all these workers.
But I don't see this budget as just us trying to sustain what is the pie at the moment. I think even when you look at the green part of it, on sustainability, there's a bigger, bolder move to develop green technologies, the green industry in Singapore. And I think you needed to create the demand, so discussion about electric vehicles in addition to everything else is going to be helpful. It's just a new way to look for another rocket for the economy, and certainly this one is hopefully not going to be polluting. It's going to be doing the opposite of that. So it's looking at what the challenges are and trying to find opportunities within that.
That's right.
But just to come back to SkillsFuture, I mean, I think my only grouse about that is that it's a periodic thing. It's as and when the government decides to top up, they top up. It's not an annual thing that's done automatically. And I think that might be better, because I think you're going to have a lot of people having to retrain all the time, because the economy is changing, the whole nature of jobs is changing, and it's happening continuously.
But there are so many schemes, adapt and grow and so on and so forth.
That's true. But I think for reskilling, I think reskilling is central. And the decision is yours. It's your decision.
You take accountability.
You're accountable for this.
You take accountability.
But I think I'm encouraged by the fact that the finance minister has done something extra for the 40-plus age group. Right? There's an extra SkillsFuture credit for them, and they are probably in the most need of reskilling. I mean, they're the ones who are facing obsolescence in terms of their skills.
Career transformation and for new jobs, new industries. I think that's quite important to look at. So it isn't just SkillsFuture to do something that we are already doing,
but you also have
to do something
on
new.
What kind of courses or training that you are enrolling yourself into? It must be digital training. It must be green tech training. It must be relevant to the new economy.
Cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity, cloud computing.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, if you're going to train yourself, you're going to train yourself in something relevant, right?
Developing industries.
Yes, but then there's always the limitations of how a 40 to 60-year-old person may be able to adapt into a lot of industries. So I think, personally, I thought to be mindful that there should be a broader range in terms of, these are really places where you can find your next unicorn to shoot Singapore into the next level. But beyond that, if you're looking at just for the 40 and 60s, just for employability, right? Perhaps there should be opening of other sectors. I thought the sectors of we are already aging in a quite a big way here. So maybe there are sectors that should focus on those.
And there were a number of support measures introduced for our older workers as well, as part of this year's budget. But I believe we've got some questions coming in from social media. Dylan, what have you got for us?
Well, thanks, Rachel. Now, welcome back to Social Media Watch. Of course, do remember to continue keep your questions coming. We are monitoring them and use the hashtag SGBudget2020. Now, it's true, we have a couple of very interesting comments now from the public. Now, the first one we have is from Scarlett Chew, who asked the question, will incentives be enough to persuade companies to keep older workers in white-collar jobs? Now, we also have Twitter user Alan So, who also has some concerns about skills upgrading. He actually expressed his happiness about the news. Now, he said another $500 in the SkillsFuture credit top-up. I haven't even used my initial $500 credits. Yay, LOL. Now, yeah, so a couple of very interesting ones. I even have one more from Gary Goh, who talks about the support for senior workers. Now, the senior worker support package, the senior employment credit, senior worker early adopter grant, etc. Is it enough to encourage companies to hire or keep older workers, and whether or not it can combat against ageism that seems quite prevalent? Rachel?
I know, Gillian, we were talking about this earlier. What are your thoughts on the packages that have been introduced for our older workers?
It's good that we have them to begin with. And I think the government's had many measures introduced to try and make the workplace more friendly for senior workers, and also have the special employment credit for older workers, which now been rejigged as the senior employment credit scheme. So I think paired with retraining, I think then there is more scope for employers to kind of envisage keeping their workers on board with them as they grow and they move into new activities. So I think it's better that we have it than not, and I think that's quite important. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's also a benefit of staying longer in the workforce and be healthier.
Yeah. But you also tapping on the experience, the markets that the senior workers know, even if the activities might be different. So
this is also one way to increase your tax base. As more people continue to work longer, your tax base is more. So that will help to increase your fiscal surplus.
Well, I thought it's a very good question, because I think ageism is very deep-rooted in corporate cultures in Singapore. And I think it's a fair question to ask, are these incentives good enough to root out this attitude? I mean, will a few dollars in savings, will that be enough to persuade companies to keep hiring older workers? And I'm not sure, I think you do need some kind of a mindset change towards older workers. And this will help. As Gillian says, it's better to have it than not to have it. But is it enough? I'm not sure it is enough. But what can help is that the things that go with it. That is incentives for upskilling or reskilling workers. Not only SkillsFuture, but incentives to companies to upskill their workers and reskill their workers. I mean, this is the problem, because as I mentioned in the pre-budget discussion, less than 15% of SMEs invest in training of their existing employees. Now, what happens to the older employees who work for those companies? They don't get retrained, and they get basically redundant.
But do you feel as a part, we've had a number of measures over the last few years. Do you feel that attitudes are changing?
I haven't noticed myself any major change.
There was a survey recently done that people felt that by the age of 48 they could see that there was wage stagnation and they were being treated as senior workers at age 48. That's really crazy. IPS did a survey 2 years ago, and about 66% of the 2,000 people we asked said that they could see ageism in the workplace, and it was there. So that's quite important. But what's the bigger picture? There's a tightening on how many foreign workers we'll take in as a Singapore system. So that's going to be an even leaner labor situation. So you're going to have that, which means that employers are going to be fighting for manpower. If you're fighting for manpower, don't you think you'd rather retain senior workers who are actually, they don't grow decrepit just because they turn 55 or 48 for that matter. And so with the tightening of that workforce situation, you're going to be in itself market driven, needing to really retain as many senior workers that you've had with you for a longer time, and then the question is just making them able to keep up and take the new jobs that you are presumably introducing or needing to change to with the introduction of technology and
totally agree
things like
with you,
that.
and also Vikram, right? I've seen some of my clients actually they continue to redeploy all the older workers.
Right.
Yeah, to automation, job redesign.
Yep.
And they find that with their wealth of experience, these people actually can contribute. Yeah. They actually can contribute even better than the younger workers.
So the scheme to help early adopters, I think that incentivizes people who want to go forward and say, I'm going to do it better than anyone else. Yeah. They will then secure that talent or keep it in place.
I think I want to put it that all these measures are supposed to complement each other in that sense. Yes. I mean, in the past when we have very free labor law that have bring in a lot of foreign, and that have boosted a lot of sectors, right, but at the expense of the imbalances in the labor market. And in a way, we are undoing some of this, but at the same time, I do see that if you encourage reskilling for the older workers, at the same time you tighten the foreign workers, and at the same time you try to encourage companies, right? All the combination, right, will allow not just about older workers being employed longer, but I think companies are more willing to take on automation, which is also a point of resistance. If you can keep on doing the same thing, right? Why do you need to spend a huge amount of capital outlay for automation?
It's just that the overall framework is that there's not going to be any way to tap outside input in terms of manpower supply. So if you keep that very tight, then I think the employers are going to be forced to restructure and take all the help to automate, to change processes, to do new things and bring in
schemes and incentive come into play. Right. How to improve the productivity at the early stage.
At the end of the pier itself, right? If you tighten it too much and you try to do this forcing, right? If I have to think of whether I'm doing it in Singapore or any parts of Asia, I might have to rethink that again. So that becomes another part.
You can also outsource.
Yes.
During the ST clip we saw earlier in the show, and there were mention of, programs for perhaps female workers, flexible working programs. But I think let's move on to the next topic. And just as a recap, slowing global economies, trade tension and artificial intelligence. And artificial disruption and climate change, these are just some of the issues that will impact the economy and businesses going forward. And during his speech, Minister Heng introduced a number of measures to combat these. Let's hear more.
2 years ago, I set out our vision of Singapore as a global Asian node of technology, innovation, and enterprise. To support this vision, in this budget, I will introduce a set of measures to drive our transformation and growth strategy. There are three key thrusts. First, enabling stronger partnerships. Second, deepening enterprise capabilities. Third, developing our people. Including sums allocated in previous years, I'm allocating a total of $8.3 billion over the next 3 years to enable transformation and growth.
So transformation and growth packages amounting to $8.3 billion over 3 years have been announced. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think, it's striking that this is bigger. This is the biggest part of the budget. Right?
Bigger than COVID-19.
Bigger than COVID-19, although COVID-19 is limited, but still, this is a significant part of the budget. So which suggests that you can't press the pause button on transformation just because you have a COVID crisis. You have to continue. You have to keep going. So you have to keep boosting skills. You have to incentivize companies. You have to have partnerships between industry and research. You have to keep continuing to support your startups. And now they've shifted the emphasis to deep tech startups, which is interesting. And they've expanded their existing programs such as Go Digital and so on, which encourages digital adoption. So these things have to continue. I mean, these things, the world is not going to stop, you know. So I think we have, I think it's very good that they've put so much emphasis on continuing with these initiatives. Yeah.
Yeah. What I like about this part is that they actually make a differentiation between different stages of growth for the enterprises and have targeted incentives for growth stage, infant stage, and mature companies. So it's very targeted. Yeah, the scheme.
That's what I was going to ask, because transformation was a key element of your proposal. With this 8.3 billion package, I mean, and businesses looking at digital disruption and so many other elements on the horizon. Are they ready to tackle these now with this package?
I'm sure with such a big amount set aside, enterprises will be very happy to really embark on and make use of all these packages. Yeah. So the basic thing is that with all this help, enterprises will accelerate much faster and be able to compete globally or regionally. You see, if you can transform well, your product and solution can be exported, right, from Singapore, and that will become a self-sustained model in future for the company itself. And then when the company becomes profitable, the government will be able to collect more taxes. That is a natural thing to do, and it becomes a self-funding kind of system going forward. So transformation is very important.
My only concern, though, is what is the take-up of these different schemes? You know,
How
I mean, there are so many schemes
our
now.
SMEs to
So many schemes that it'll be good to know how to what extent companies are actually taking advantage of them.
And from your clients,
this includes. You can. What do you think?
And that's our job actually. So sometimes we ourselves also get a bit confused with the slew of incentives. So what we normally do is we do an analysis with the client. What are their needs at the various stage of their development? But there are, apart from professionals like ourselves, there are also trade associations, business association, TACs that can offer all this counseling, talking, and meetings with all these companies, and also ESG, all the agencies. But you're right, the dissemination, the awareness has to be much broader and deeper.
Is there still hesitance on the ground?
Doing more on that area. I think they recognize that there is a lot of schemes available, but the take-up, some companies, if they can be your client, I'm quite sure they have enough capital to embark on some course. But for the smaller companies, right, there lies the problem. How do they know what schemes are available for them? And I think the government, I believe they already have set up departments trying to give better access to information to SMEs, and that probably can be enhanced to help that segment that probably needs the most of this help in the first place.
So I think it's actually, maybe there needs to be a shift of emphasis. Instead of coming up with more and more schemes, you just try and increase the uptake of existing schemes. And this extends also to the industry transformation maps. You talk to a lot of small companies and they say, we don't understand what these are. You know, they haven't figured out how they can get involved in these ITMs, you know, the 23 of them. So I think outreach, education, all those things really need to be emphasized rather than just keeping on producing more and more schemes and expanding them.
And especially during difficult times when a lot of companies are just trying to keep their head above water and, you know, keep business going. Looking to, you know, find out more about different schemes might be a bit of a challenge. So it's, you know, time to tap the experts.
Quite interesting, because when you talk about experts, I think there's a new program introduced called the Executive in Residence program. So presumably these are sort of business mentors who are introduced to enterprises to help them plan, to strategize, and I hope get your input on how to tap some of these grants. There's also one very interesting, the equivalent for the heartlands. So I think there are the heartland shopkeepers or hawker associations, and they are not left out, you see. So that's quite interesting, because we're not just talking about high value add, international firms, export oriented, but also the local retailers and the domestic economy has some focus in this budget.
Okay, and there was just one more question that I wanted to ask for this segment, because Looking at the workforce, we saw that the budget announced a reduction in the SPAS dependency ratio ceiling for construction marine shipyard processes from 20% to 15%. What are your thoughts on that?
I was a bit surprised when I read that, because for the later passages, they did say that they are not applying any changes to the manufacturing sector for now. But when you look at the first few, right, those sectors, I believe that they have a significant amount of foreign labor, and possibly quite a significant portion of those labor are in China. Yeah, so there is a question that if this rather trying times for some companies, especially those with a lot of labor exposure that is from China, right? Would this be a difficult time for them, given that they are doing what they have already? This was I do know that this is something that was already in pipeline, but given the circumstances, perhaps maybe a delay in conjunction with everybody in the rest of the economy might be a better outcome for now.
Okay, thanks, Alvin. And I think we'll move on to the next topic. And climate change is expected to cost Singapore some $100 billion over the next 100 years. And to help combat the effects of climate change, Minister Heng has introduced a number of sustainability measures in his budget speech.
For both public health and climate change reasons, we should progressively phase out the use of ICE vehicles towards cleaner alternatives such as hybrids and EVs. We'll set a long-term strategic goal for Singapore to achieve this. Our vision is to phase out ICE vehicles and have all vehicles run on cleaner energy by 2040.
And some $5 billion has been set aside for the Coastal and Flood Protection Fund to protect against rising sea levels. That's quite a hefty investment. Vikram, what are your thoughts?
Yes, but it's, I think the total investment is what, 100 billion?
100 billion.
100 billion over 100 years.
Over 100 years.
So this is just the
so
start.
This is a down payment. This is a very small down payment.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a super long-term project. But yeah, I mean, it has to go ahead. I mean, this is, I mean, rising sea levels are a fact of life, and it's going to continue. So I think we have no choice. But maybe we should also explore technologies such as what the Dutch in the Netherlands, what do? They face the same problem. Maybe they can, is it possible to do it less expensively? So that's another thing. But among all the measures, I was really encouraged by the incentives for EV adoption. I mean, Singapore has surprisingly low EV adoption. I mean, by EVs, I mean, include also hybrids, right?
Yeah.
So it's surprisingly low, and the price point for hybrids is really not as low as it should be. I mean, it should be subsidized. These things should be subsidized. So I'm really delighted to see that there's a
and an increase
45% rebate.
Charging stations as well, I think will definitely help.
At the moment, if you can only have an electric car really practically if you live in a landed property.
Yeah.
If you don't live in a landed property, it's a bit of a struggle to find charging points, right? So if that changes, I think the whole situation with the car ownership here will change.
But they have the equivalence of the fuel subsidy that fuel excise duties that they collect, right?
Yeah, and in order to revenue problem, right?
Yeah, they have the revenue problem. Then again, in a way, when I look at it, it kind of defeats the first incentive that you have mentioned when they have this lump sum tax that's thrown on it. So like for like, it's in a way it kind of neutralizes each other, right? Yeah. If any.
Tackling this climate change risk is also a show of our commitment to the Paris Agreement, and this carbon footprint is always features in every budget discussion, I think, going forward. So my view is that if the world will be looking at us, Singapore being a small country, how we tackle this climate change issue, it will have a longer impact on how people want to lead their quality life going forward. And it may even escalate to how you attract global talent to work in Singapore if you can manage this issue, which is very close to a lot of young people's heart. And that will really put Singapore in a good light. You know, if you can tackle this issue, have a well thought through plan in the long run to tackle this issue. No doubt I agree with you. It's expensive, 100 billion over 100 years. That's where it will be a strain on our fiscal surplus or kitty. But from the environmental part of this is where I think the GST will come into good use, and also maybe other form of taxes that can come along.
Just to clarify though, in the last budget, I think the finance minister said that these longer term infrastructural development projects will probably be funded through borrowings because some of the benefits accrue to future generations. So you don't want to tap the whole sum from current generations. So I suppose you could set aside each year from the budget something towards the 100 billion, but there's also other ways of financing that infrastructural development that would be more equitable.
And I think we've got a question in from social media, or a comment in on social media. Dylan, what's the latest?
Well, thanks, Rachel. Now, sustainability is quite a talked about topic on our social media. Let's see, we have a comment here from Kumar H, who says on Facebook, if the car population is pegged at zero growth, then promoting EV vehicles with lower taxes will be beneficial. Of course, if the objective is to make car ownership punitive, then it's not worth it. Back to you, Rachel.
That's a interesting comment. What are your thoughts?
No, I'm just reflecting that there's a lot of my friends who say we're not going to own cars anymore. Yeah, I mean, because the
transportation systems,
including Grab and Gojek and things like that, and private car hires are so good, and the MRT is continuing to expand. And a lot of people who don't own cars say that life is fine, even when they don't live near an MRT. So I think that option is going to expand. So I suspect that I don't think the intention is to make car ownership punitive as such. It's just to make it cleaner and more efficient.
And nowadays people don't buy co-sharing houses, cars, So I think the car population will get smaller.
There's quite a lot of public purse being expended on expanding the MRT system.
Yes.
So remember, from 2013 to 2030, the MRT system is going to be doubled. So I think that to Vikram's point, it's going to make it less relevant that you have your own car unless you had a family to take care of, lots of groceries and the kids that we all need. Then you would have a need for point-to-point, but in which case you have the co-sharing and the sharing economy kick in as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite a lot of public money going to public infrastructure.
Yes, which is good. Yes. And so you will take us to a situation like in New York, where a lot of people just don't have cars. They just, I mean, for one thing, parking in New York is ridiculous. Traffic ridiculous, and people live quite happily without cars. And this is true of several cities, and I think it's going to be increasingly true of Singapore.
So it'll be interesting to see the EV take-up after this initiative. Now, we've spoken about the $5 billion investment and what's happening with EV vehicles. We also saw the launch of an ESG eco-fund to community partnerships on sustainability issues, which I think is interesting to see more initiatives grow up from the community. Gillian, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's the general sort of Singapore Together movement, but certainly you have a lot of younger talent interested in moving into clean tech, green tech, and so you never know what might pop out from the ground. Of course, this is also, it will include community initiatives to kind of keep your neighborhood green and clean. So I think that's not just think of this as a commercial thing, but certainly a way in which ground-up initiatives, ground-up ideas can be tapped. You never know what you don't know, and there might be interesting ways in which from the ground up we do things differently that might be useful not just for Singapore but for other cities. Please bear in mind, we've always been sort of out there saying that we want to be a leader of the pack in terms of sustainable livability among cities around the globe. So I think that this is quite helpful. Yeah.
And from a business perspective, Wu Hong, in the KPMG proposal, you spoke a little bit about incentives for property players when it comes to green initiatives. Are your clients, is this something that they're actively searching for? I mean, things have changed quite substantially from 10 years ago to where we are now.
So if you look at the commercial buildings in Shenton Way, you can see that a lot of new buildings, right? There are also a number of old buildings, so they may not be environmental friendly or green per se. So we are hoping that what are the incentives? Maybe there's some allowance to entice all these landowner or property owner to remodify their buildings, to make it more green. But probably this will be in the next budget that we can see. Yeah. So these are important things to make Singapore more green.
And there was a lot to digest in this year's budget, and we're almost out of time. So lastly, I'd like to ask each of you if there's anything in this budget that we might have missed, starting with Vikram.
You mean that we might have missed covering?
Oh, no, there's definitely a lot to digest, and I don't think we could have done it in an hour. Okay. But I mean, that was missed from the budget speech that you would have liked to see.
Okay, what would I have liked to see? Actually, I sort of agree with Alvin's point on foreign worker levies. I mean, there's no change in foreign worker levies. And I think some of the most vulnerable sectors, like tourism, food and beverage, hospitality, they are some of the biggest hirers of foreign workers. And they got no relief on that front. And if you look at the Singapore Business Federation's annual surveys, their biggest complaint is getting workers, the difficulty of getting workers, and especially in labor-intensive type of industries like hospitality. So I think the one thing that was missing for me is some relief on foreign worker levies, at least for some of the vulnerable sectors. Yeah.
Gillian?
Well, difficult to say because I think we all agreed it was quite a comprehensive budget and very, very targeted. So I hope that there's enough there to support families. There's now an expansion of the ceiling for access to public housing, so that should help with family formation. I know my friends in civil society always say, is there more support for working mothers? And I think you've seen that in the past. So, but there's always something to watch out for when it comes to supporting families, so that they can do the juggling act between sort of income generation to support families, but also, support to be at home as well. So something in that space, I think. But that's all I can say, really.
And
yeah, I was struggling what to say. I think that we saw the corporate tax rebate of being given, but it's not a big amount. So in fact, only benefit companies that pay taxes, right? So companies that are not paying taxes, they are really in a loss situation. They won't benefit from it. Then there are probably the losses carried backward you can use to do that. But I was hoping to see probably more incentive, like the research and development incentive for companies that they've been claiming, right? So some of my clients are saying, oh, I am doing R&D, but I'm not claiming the incentive because I don't make profits, right? So even if I claim what's the use, I just increase my losses. So I was hoping that there may be some cash payout or cash, for this company, but I don't see it here. So maybe it's something that maybe we can hope for in the next budget.
And Alvin, it seems that they really brought out the big guns with this budget, quite a significant spend, and we've also got quite a interesting deficit for this year as well. What are your key recaps and anything that you've missed that you think should have been included in this year's budget?
Well, the only word that came to my mind was women. 50% or more than 50% of the workforce is women, right? Yeah, don't seem to suddenly the kind of lost focus here. And I know there are some measures for family, but there's not much to really to encourage more women going into or more active participation in workforce. I mean, as the society turns more grey, right? In a lot of countries are already turning towards the women workforce, because I mean they play in my view, a disadvantaged role where they have to take care of the family and childbearing and things like that. So I think there should actually be more, especially in this case where the labour force is tightening. You are not just you don't just need to muster up your older workers. I think you have to muster up the remainder of the workers that is not in the workforce right now, which is the women. Yes.
Just 2 seconds as well. I wanted to ask you. So, 10.9 billion for the deficit this year. So quite a substantial spend.
Correct.
And what are you looking at in terms of how this is going to impact an economic recovery?
Okay, the thing is, first off, we thought it was going to be 4 billion. I think markets in some of the estimates are as high as 8. So this is, I think, well above what markets were expecting. And rightly so, because we are facing a short-term issue as well as longer-term things that we need to take care of. But at the same time, right, we also are quite mindful that the estimates, while is quite big, governments have typically been very conservative, or typically they tend to state more. But then when we come to the actual year itself, if things turn out better next year, the deficit itself, most of the years turn out to be smaller than what was put in right now, what is budgeted. So it need not necessarily have a very big impact, let's say, on at least for the current country's credit rating, right? I don't think that there will be a significant impact, and a lot of the measures are very sensible and not spending on white elephants, useless projects. So it doesn't cause a concern on, at least for me, the credit rating of the country by having this deficit that is put in budgeted.
It's equivalent
right
of 2.1% of GDP, but it's fully funded. I think that's the point. And also, I think the government was probably preparing itself for a real downturn with the US trade tensions, remember, towards the end of last year. So it's already kept the powder dry, and then we've had COVID. So it's all available to tap. And I think the minister was at pains to emphasize this is what we do in terms of very prudent financing and putting money aside. Towards the end of the term, you also don't know what you don't know, but it's also always, this is how the PAP government plans it, that towards the end of the term there'll be enough to sort of ensure that if nothing happens like COVID, there'll be plenty to distribute in terms of sharing the fruits of success. So in this case, it's prudent and it's a fully funded deficit, and I think we can just rest easy that we're in good hands.
Okay, well, once again, thank you to all our guests for your interesting insights. That's all we have time for this year's 2020 budget announcement. And for more details on the budget speech, please visit straitstimes.com and the podcast on Money FM. I'm Rachel Kelly. Thank you for tuning in to Budget 2020, jointly organised by the Straits Times and Money FM 89.3, presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG and Reach.